pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. We have two changes to tonight's agenda. We have a new 6 India handout that everybody now has. And we also have page 2 of the 6 Charlie. We've got it corrected now for the annual street maintenance budget for the out years 2021 and beyond. So with that said, can I go ahead and get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the City Council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. The items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from this agenda and considered in normal sequence. On tonight's agenda, we have the following. We have 4 Alpha, which is the City Council minutes for October 28th, 2019. We have 4 Bravo, resolution approving disbursements through November 12th, 2019. 4 Charlie, which is the utility easement request. And 4 Delta, which is the federal requirements document for 2019 HRA's Small City Development Program, better known as SCDP. Okay. So, does everybody have anything regarding the consent agenda that is of issue at this point? If not, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Public comment provides an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make a comment must sign up in advance of the meeting on the sheet provided and identify themselves by providing the name and address. Do we have anybody tonight? Anybody from the audience wish to address City Council? Okay, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public comment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We now move on to our regular agenda. First item on the docket is 6 Alpha, which is the Sueur Fire Chief recommendation. City Administrator Grupo.
Mayor Haig, members of City Council, before you, as you can notice, we have some fire department members in attendance. City Administrator received a recommendation letter from the Sueur Fire Department to appoint Jesse Wenich to be the new fire chief. Administration has reviewed the qualifications of the position and has determined Mr. Wenich to be a viable candidate. He is not in attendance tonight. That is by design. Typically, we don't have the candidate come to the meetings, so we have a representative group of the fire department here. So Mr. Wenich is recommended to be appointed to the position immediately. A little bit of information. I don't know Jesse's a local individual. A lot of you may know him, but he was born and raised in the Sueur area. He graduated from the Sueur Henderson School District High School. He's the owner of JW Cabinets here in Sueur. He's been a member of the Sueur Fire Department for 18 years. He's completed 2 out of the 3 leadership classes that are required through the minimum qualifications of the position. The 3rd leadership course will be completed in March at the State Fire School. And he's quite accredited. He's completed a total of 65 training courses in the State Fire School in his time here in Sueur. There's a great picture of Jesse I got from his website, from his business. But the recommendation that we have tonight is the City Administrator is recommending that the City Council pass a motion appointing Jesse Wenich as the Sueur Fire Department Fire Chief effective immediately. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Sullivan.
Jasper, how long's the term on that?
Currently, there is not a term. The policy states that every year there will be an evaluation and a recommendation from the fire department.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to appoint Jesse Weddich as the Sueur Fire Department Fire Chief. This position is considered a City of Sueur employee, and compensation is based on participation during paid on-call events.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations to our new Fire Chief, Jesse Weddich. We now move on to 6 Bravo, which is the compensation and classifications to every city administrator. Good luck on the mustaches, gentlemen.
I'll give a little time to let the room clear out.
I'd say, what's the hurry? Is there a fire?
Nothing clears a room like a comp study, right? Mayor, Council, thank you for inviting me here tonight. So my name is Leah Davis. I'm president of AEM Workforce Solutions and a partner at Abdo Myers, CPA firm. And we were engaged to conduct your 2019 position classification and compensation study project. We've been working on this over the summer, so I'm kind of here tonight to present you the final findings of the study and to talk through, sorry, thanks, you're so close, I just assumed you could hear me. To talk through some of the findings and kind of next steps and to answer any questions you might have about the study, how we conducted the study, some of the findings, and some of the recommendations and next steps. So we'll kind of go high level. I think you all should have received a copy of the final study. So I'll just kind of go through step by step. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time. It can get kind of lengthy, so if there's something you want addressed, just interrupt and interject, and we'll kind of go through it that way. So the last internal compensation and position classification study that was done for the city was in 2015. And per the information we received, that was actually the first year that the city of Sueur instituted a formal step and grade classification program for their compensation model. And so in this spring, the city went out for proposals to a few different providers to sort of refresh that study. There's been some changes to positions in terms of duties, responsibilities. There have been new positions added. And so there's been just a lot of change within the city. So wanted to take a look at those positions and how those are being classified and ranked within the organization. And then in addition, it's just kind of good practice to do a maintenance market study every 5-ish years, 3 to 5 years. Typically we see cities doing that. And so that was sort of the motivation for the study. So as part of the study, we did a few things. The first thing we started with was getting updated job descriptions from the city. And so working with leadership, both Jasper, Stacy, and Zach, we pulled together all of the existing job descriptions for the city. They worked with other leaders, with department heads and leaders to make sure that those job descriptions were accurate and up to date. There were many positions that internally, there were some pretty noticeable changes made to those position descriptions to get them current and up to date since the last time they were looked at. And so all of the study findings that we'll talk about today reflect those new positions with all of the most current information. Once we had those job descriptions, we then went through and did kind of a high-level compliance review of those positions. So both, do they include the correct accommodation language? Were they consistent in terms of physical requirements for positions that were similar? And then we also took a look at the Fair Labor Standards Act exempt and non-exempt classification. So that gets fairly legal, but just kind of looking at if we have people labeled as exempt from overtime or salaried, do they meet the qualifications under the federal law to be qualified as such? And so all of that material is included in the study. You got the short version, but all of that has been provided to leadership, so I'm sure you have access to those. It was over 200 pages if we included all of that, so I didn't think you wanted that. So it's all available if you need it. Once we have those solid position descriptions, then we go out to do the position classification part of the study. So that's where we're taking a look at a variety of different areas per position. And again, I think it's important to note that when we're doing pointing or classification, we're looking at the position, never the individual in the position. So the points should be relevant whether it's your highest performer or your lowest performer, because it is position specific, okay? And so we're looking at, we utilize the Hay model to do that classification. Your prior study used a modified Princeton model. They're very similar. Both are looking at just overall impact on the city, level of knowledge, skills, abilities required to complete each position, how much experience would be required, what's the total time to learn, how much independent thinking and judgment and impact on city budget. So we're looking at a wide range of criteria. There's more information in your report if you want to get into the details. But the Hay model tends to, in the end, assign a little bit higher point value than the modified Princeton does, in my experience when comparing the two. And we kind of like it because the higher point values give you a little more spread between positions, so it's easier to fit new positions in as you grow. In your case, though, when it was all said and done, it was extremely minor, any of the point changes from position to position. So, any questions on that pointing? So we're looking at each position, then once that's assigned, then we really take a look and set them all side by side and make sure that they make sense organizationally. So, is the manager classified appropriately above, a direct report position, those kinds of things, and just looking overall at the whole organization. So in your study, you did provide then what are updated points. So table 1 in your study provides those updated point assignments for our recommendation. And again, there weren't any real surprises there. So I don't think any of that should be anything you didn't expect. Once we have the position points, then we go out and conduct our market study. So, so in order to do that, we're really taking a look at what are comparable cities, municipalities, and in some cases just private sector employers. And so there's 1 or 2 positions that we actually did take a look at private sector data because that was more comparable for both the area and the position for those jobs. And we're looking at cities that have comparable size, comparable geographic proximity to the metro, similar, your electric utilities is a little bit unique. You've got some other sort of things that we wanted to make sure to take into consideration when we were doing those things as well. So, you're within 30 miles of some large communities, Mankato, North Mankato, and, within 60 miles of the South Metro. So, when you're looking at going out and trying to compete for talented employees, the Metro is not out of range for you in a lot of cases. So we wanted to make sure we kept that in mind. And it is important to note, so we provided, table 2 in your study lists all of the municipalities that we may have pulled at least 1 data point from. So it's a very long list, and you'll see some of these municipalities, we may have only used 1 position to get a data point from. Now there's, we also received some specific cities that Sueur wanted to make sure we were getting lots of comparable data for, cities like New Prague, where you're just identifying this really is a comparable for us. We need multiple positions, and so some of these cities we used nearly all positions had a comparable data point. Any questions on where we pulled the data? Then that was all pulled down from the annual League of Minnesota Cities Salary and Benefit Survey, 2019 data.
I have a question.
Yes.
Obviously, not every city participates in that. Is that a correct statement?
In the League of Minnesota Cities?
Yes.
Correct.
So if I were to ask you, why isn't St. James there on your list?
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery, Jordan, for example, are not on that list. Do we know if those to me are in the category you're talking about in terms of proximity to other places?
Jordan is.
It
Yep,
is?
Jordan is on the list.
Montgomery's
Okay.
not though.
Montgomery is not, and St. James is not.
Third column.
In the event that a city is not participating, so that's a very
That would
good
be one.
question. Yeah.
Okay.
In the event that a city is not participating, we either don't use it because we don't have the data. But if it's if a city that Sueur has come out and said, these are our 10 that we really need to have comparables for, if one of those cities that's been identified by Sueur was not on the list, we actually conducted our own survey.
That was my next question. Thank you.
Yes. Yep.
I'd like to go back to that a little bit. There's 802 cities that make up Minnesota. That said, how many cities are actually represented by the League of Minnesota Cities? Do you have that information off the top of your head?
I would not know that off the top of my head. And I think, the league is pulling city data, counties, there's other, other jurisdictions that are represented in that study. So
But to be clear, this is federally and state mandated, is that correct?
the market study,
The fair equity pay and compensation,
the pay equity requirement is actually a Minnesota statute.
that's a Minnesota statute.
Yep, and I think it's important, so that's a good question. It's important to draw a distinction between your marketability study and the Minnesota pay equity study. So this marketability study is purely where are we at the city of Sueur and for any given position, and where is the rest of the market at for any given position, purely so that we can remain competitive and attract and retain the talent that we need to continue successfully operating the city. The pay equity, which we'll talk about, that has more to do with saying, what positions do we have in the city that are predominantly filled by men? What positions do we have within the city that are predominantly filled by women? And based on their point classification and where we say their impact is on the city, is there desperate treatment for women for those female predominant positions? So they are different.
Well, we want to make sure that there's gender equality between, obviously, the men and the women. That's
Yes.
the whole purpose of that.
Yes.
We like this.
That's exactly right. And equity for positions that carry equitable impact within the city. So you may have one position that's, predominantly filled by women, and it may be paid less than a predominantly male filled position. But as long as there is a reasonable point difference or different grades for those positions because of the knowledge, skills, abilities, and those types of things, that's fine as long as we can explain that.
In regards to the data points, did you actually find other cities within your study that were able to go ahead and match 100% with the city of Sueur because of our uniqueness with the various entities that we offer that many like-sized cities wouldn't offer?
I would say there are definitely cities that have similarities, maybe by department does that make sense?
Sure.
So your utilities, the electric utilities, that was something we even went out to, like Grand Rapids Public Utilities, and there was a couple other, right off the top of my head, I can't remember. There was one other specific utility group that we reached out to. So sometimes you have to kind of pick and choose by department. Comparing your public works department and that pay to a city like New Prague, for instance, that's going to be real similar. Police, those types of, but sometimes when you get into the rec center, for instance, is a bit of an anomaly for a city your size. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about where we saw a lot of difference in the marketability study, but that may be perfectly reasonable to have that for a variety of different reasons.
Okay, I guess my final question before I move on would be,
fine.
for the like-sized cities that obviously have utilities like Sueur does and a police department, do you find in all the other cities that are part of this study, are these all union positions, or do we have any cities that represent non-union positions?
Oh, I would say it's kind of across the board. Because there are cities that have non-union public works, and there are cities that have even non-union police. So, and we don't differentiate between those cities when we're going out to the league. So we're not even drawing attention to that, because it's just, if you're trying to hire a police officer, what is the market for that position? That's kind of really what we're focused on.
Does anybody else have anything before we move on?
I have another question.
Yeah.
Please understand, these are just so we get background. So it seems to me that to live in Sueur or the surrounding area is far less expensive than living in New Prague.
Mm-hmm.
How do we account for that?
Well, so there's sort of like a few layers to that question, right? And so the angle or the perspective that we're coming from is while there may be a cost of living difference, this study is primarily focused on addressing, are you offering wages that are allowing you to successfully attract and retain the people you need to get the job done? And we can tell you this is what the market says, and then position by position, you kind of have to make the determination of, are we okay being a little below the market or different from the market, as long as we're having success keeping those positions filled. So it is a bit of a balance. You may take the stance and say, well, the cost of living is lower here, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of if you can keep those positions filled. So there is a bit of a gut check, if you make the determination that we're okay being below the market, and you just kind of have to keep an eye on it.
Recruit and retain, that's the whole
Yeah,
principle.
my job is to tell you where the market's at, and then you can make a determination as a city to say, where do we want to fit or align?
But to be clear, your market is essentially the whole state.
No, there are definitely cities we're not using. So most of these cities that we're going after have similar population sizes. We tried to keep it relatively similar in terms of proximity to the metro. So we're not pulling any inner city or very central metro communities. I think we tried not to use any very, very northern Minnesota. That seems to be its own. They just have a population issue that drives some market numbers. So there are definitely cities we're throwing out for a variety of reasons because they just don't make sense. And there are some that are much larger than the Sueur, but we're trying to pull in comparables for some of those other departments that you need represented in the study. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, thank you. So in your report, table 3 shows you position by position where that market study came out. I won't go through that in great detail, but there are a couple important things I just want to point out. So as you're looking through that it's kind of clear what's being represented there. So the first thing to keep in mind is that the market minimum salary, that is representative of where does the city of Le Sueur fall in relation to the market. And that is a market average. So when we're going out and looking at the comparables, we're looking at what are the ranges. So if City A has a city administrator position, what is the lowest pay on their range for that position, and what is the highest pay for their range? And we're averaging those minimum and maximum. Because whatever happens in the middle is a little bit irrelevant. You just want to know kind of what's the average range. So, for instance, if we just go to pick a position here, city administrator. Sorry, Jasper. So you can see that the market is representing an average minimum there of that $47.10. That's the average minimum. And then if you go to the next column to the right is reflective of that as an annualized number, so an annual salary amount based on a 40-hour work week. And then the next column to your right indicates where the city of Le Sueur's current range is in comparison to the market. So if it's negative, that means that the city of Le Sueur's current minimum pay for that position is $1.13 below the market. If it's positive, you would be above the market. And then the next column over is just reflective of that difference as a percentage. And then as you keep moving your way to the right, then we're talking about the maximum pay for that position. And so there's a few, there's definitely positions in here. It fluctuates. We always see that. You're going to see some are above, some are below. So none of that is really surprising. I'll get into a couple of the positions that probably drew your attention. We'll talk a little more about those as well. But any questions with how that table works? Okay. Very good. So just some key findings. So a couple things to remember. So it is based on 2019 data. So by the time you implement, if you choose to implement, it would be effective 2020. So just keep that in mind. You'd be looking at next year. A negative average market variance indicates that you're below the market, so that's that dollar and or percentage, and if it's positive, your current range would be above the market. And so on average, the minimums for each position were about 6% below the market average minimum for each position. And unless employees are negotiating more than that starting pay step for their position on your current scale, this may be a recruiting challenge for you. I'm not sure. That's something that when we talked about kind of just doing a gut check and how's it actually working for you, you can kind of take a look at that. The current pay range maximums for each position within the city were on average 11% below the market maximum. And it looks like I have a typo in there, so my apologies. Should say maximum for similar positions. So, that's just saying employees that top step is a little bit below where the market would indicate. And then there were several positions that I listed out that had a pretty significant market variance. But I think as you look at those, it's important to know that it's hard to know if we're talking about the same duties, responsibilities. You did talk about your proximity to the metro. I think a couple of the positions that really jumped out were some of the part-time office administrative positions for like in the rec center, and in all reality the title is office administration, but it's more of a retail clerk kind of position. They're checking in people at the rec center and that sort of thing. So for those positions we did try to even go out and pull or your coaches and soccer leaders and lifeguards. We tried to pull private sector data for some of that too, to try to get a more realistic range there. So but for all of those positions, as long as you can identify why they might be different and what might be unique about that position as compared to, some of the rec center positions, our comparables are going to come from much, much larger cities with a much more, larger recreation program. And so while it might be below the market, it might still be appropriate. So I think you just have to take a look at those. Any questions on that? We talked a little bit about the League of Minnesota Cities, and then we also just throw in that year over year, and you've been doing this with your plan, but for the last probably three years or so, we're seeing cities implementing like a 2 or 3% COLA year over year. So that's, if you were to implement the proposed step and grade program, you just want to be making sure you're maintaining sort of the validity of that program by considering those COLAs every year to just keep up.
Based off your target cities that you have within your study, how many are using CPI Midwest as their basis for COLA increase as opposed to some random number that doesn't have any real teeth to it?
Right. The only way I can answer that confidently is to say that if you go the league, for instance, as part of that salary survey, they're all reporting what their COLA is year over year. And if you go and just pull sort of average COLA data, they're almost all running in that 2 to 3 range. Some of them are a little higher based on merit, so people have different sort of increased models. But if they had been following the index, I think you'd be seeing things more in the 1 to 2 range. So my only way to answer that is to say I think they're not, because that's not the increases we're seeing from the league data. Right, wrong, or otherwise.
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
all this data is raw salary data.
Yes.
How do we factor in medical, dental, other benefits? How do we compare that so we know where we are in the market?
Yep. So that's sort of like an add-on to the compensation study if that was something you wanted to take a look at, but a lot of that data is also reported through the league study. So cities that respond to the league study also provide a lot of what kind of benefits are you offering, what's the premium share, PTO, time off, and so there is a way to pull some of that data. That ends up being oftentimes a little more of the sending out a personal survey to the cities you want to get that information from, because there can be holes in some of the league responses, but you just have to go out and get it.
But to be clear, it's not in this report.
This is raw wage data.
Thank you.
Yep. Any questions there? Okay. So once we kind of get all of those pieces, so you've got the position classifications, you've got the market study, we had conversations with city leadership about what are your goals going forward. Market study is one thing, but the goal of any compensation model is to drive other city objectives and strategies, and so we wanted to get an idea of where you're going and how this model can help support you and get you there. So we talked a little bit, all of the recommendations that we're making in terms of the updated step and grade scale are based on kind of 3 key assumptions. One being that you're anticipating growth in the next 3 to 5 years, that positions are going to continue to change and develop, that you're going to need the right people in the right seats to get that done, and that retaining your key people is important. We also assumed that you're interested and open to implementing a more performance and merit-based increase or step system, and so that's a direction. A lot of cities are doing that. Historically, maybe it's been a little more length of service based, but I think every city we're working with is saying we just want to start working our way that direction, to both primarily to be able to provide incentives to your highest performers, and be able to do some of those things. So. And then the third is just that we also understand that there's employees that are included in this study that are represented by collective bargaining agreements. And so, even if you accept and approve this proposed model, they would not fall under this model, but that you'd have the data as you go into your next negotiation cycle. And that historically they've aligned pretty well with your internal model, and so it'll be a tool for you as you go into those negotiations. All right, so on table 4 is kind of what we proposed for your updated compensation model. So what you'll find is the model has steps 1 through 9 being your standard steps. Your current model also has 9 steps, so that aligns really well. And so those steps 1 through 9 really kind of keep you very close to what the market minimum and maximum averages were. Give or take 3%. The margin of error for any given position is about 3%. All positions fit within that range currently, so you would be able to get, if you were to implement every position and every individual in those positions would fit within that standard scale once you implement it, so no outliers basically. What's a little different is we went from 20 grades to 15 grades. And really, your prior grades had a 6% difference between grades. So if someone were to be promoted and move into a new grade, it was a 6% increase. This is a 12% difference between grades, and what that allows you to do is promote an individual into a position that might be at a higher grade, but move them back a couple steps. Still give them, promotion level increase, but it moves them back a few steps and opens the top up for them to provide incentive to continue progressing in that role. So I think that will be a nice feature for you. The other thing in consideration of the city moving toward more of a merit-based or performance-based step increase, your prior steps were 2.75% from one step to the next step. That was the increase. And this will move you to a 3.25% increase from step to step, because in theory, the goal then would be that it wouldn't be a guaranteed increase, so we don't have to keep it. We want to increase the incentive, knowing that it won't be sort of a guarantee as you proceed, if that's the direction you proceed.
The 3.25% only applies to the bonus performance stuff, right?
All steps, 3.25% between steps. Yep.
Okay.
Then, so you've got that standard scale. The bonus scale is an additional 3 steps that are intended to be 100% performance-based, and they would allow you, when merited or when agreed upon, to move an employee in a key position or your highest performers a little bit above the market average. So to move you into maybe like the 30th quartile in terms of maximum salary. So it's sort of a retention tool. It would never be length of service based. It would be something that, you know, in special circumstances, you could move an individual a little higher than the market average if you needed to retain, and still keep them within your overall model.
I have a question in that regard.
Yeah.
Is it improper, illegal, not correct to use bonuses? If you put someone in the green thing here, they're gonna get that until they leave. Where a bonus could be a one-time, and if they continue, you could give them another bonus.
There are specific rules and regulations around bonuses for government employees. So I think that's something you'd have to really, really take a look at. One of the things is government employees typically can't receive retro pay. And so if you're awarding a performance bonus based on prior performance, they can typically be considered retro pay.
Just wanted to clear.
Yeah, no, it gets tricky. So that's a tool that a lot of cities aren't able to use. This gives you at least the ability to, but you are locked in once you pay, once you award it.
I think it's important to point out to you that we have a personnel budget committee, and 3 of us on city council comprise that committee, so some of the questions that we're asking are for the benefit of our associates that are not part of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've spent an awful lot of time going through, obviously, not only the 2020 budget process, but spending time on going through the comp and class study as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, there's a lot of moving parts, so. So then overall, you know, the range from the start step to the max step on the standard scale is about 29%. So the employee has the ability to move 29% from the minimum to the maximum, and then there's an additional 10% available within that bonus scale if an employee were to meet the qualifications to do that. And then the last table, table 5, outlines is really kind of what's the cost to implement, because that's the bottom line, right? So, so what you can see there is for each position, where those new grades would be assigned based on our recommended point assignments. What are the current average, or what's the current average rate for each of those positions? And then if you were to adopt the proposed table, what would the standard minimum, midpoint, standard max, and additionally what would be the standard bonus step for each of those positions? So it kind of gives you the range by position. Again, it's important to note you've got some positions that are represented by a collective bargaining agreement, so they would not hop on this table if adopted. We would wait until negotiations are completed to see if you could align better there. But overall, the proposed compensation model is really intended to help you both get in line with the market, maintain your pay equity compliance. So we did run testing. Your current model meets all pay equity compliance requirements, as does the proposed model. And we also loaded all of your information so you're ready to report your 2019 pay equity reporting. So that's ready to go for you based on this year's data. If you, some of our recommendations would be to adopt the plan effective 2020, move everyone on to that plan. You would move each individual onto the step closest to their current wage without going backwards. So some people might go up 10 cents, some people might go up $1.25, but it's just going to depend on where they are currently and where that next step is on the table as assigned. We would recommend that then you're just using the full table to, you know, address cost of living adjustments. So to evaluate and address those on an annual basis, which would move the whole table and keep your min and max in line with the market, whatever number you choose to use. And then using the steps to sort of navigate your way toward the performance-based increases. And then it's also just important to note too that whenever an employer is moving toward more of a performance-based model, that you're taking a really good look at what is our performance evaluation and performance management process. So that's very clear for managers as to what performance are we shooting for, what levels, you know, warrant increases, and so that's being applied consistently across departments. All right, any questions for me?
Would you like to go through the implementation cost for the city of Sueur?
I can, yes.
And while you're doing that, my question would be, how many of your cities that you have as clients opt to go ahead and proportion this out over a few years as opposed to doing it all in one lump sum?
Well, my question would be when you say, so we're talking about could we do this in phases?
Exactly.
So the challenge, well, a couple things. One, you would be doing it in phases, even if fully adopted, because you've got two segments of employees who won't jump on right away, so you will have some time. All your unionized employees wouldn't hop on right away. So, in effect, even full adoption would be a phase-in for your police and your public works, because they would remain on their current bargaining agreement until the next negotiation cycle.
Unfortunately, or fortunately for the police, they have a clause that we have to
Open it back up.
reopen. And so we're gonna have to look at that.
Okay,
This is
okay.
the reason why I'm asking.
It's not as simple as you said, that's what I meant by it. I'm not saying anything wrong with our police department at all.
Yep,
I'm just saying that doesn't apply.
that's just the reality.
We're not future negotiating, we already have.
Got it. Yeah.
City administrator approval.
My honest answer is I've never had anybody try to do it in phases because I don't know how, practically speaking.
I understand the math, I understand it by not doing it all at once. We're certainly gonna go ahead and take a group of folks and have them behind the power curve for the next year, both with their incentive pay as well as any COLA increase that potentially might be awarded.
Yep,
But that said, you know, you're gonna go ahead and cover what the cost is, but I'll go ahead and say what that number is. It's about $114,000 increase for 2020 over what we currently have for salary right now,
yep,
so.
yep. So if you took every position, every individual in every position, moved them onto the proposed step and grade table, you'd be looking at approximately 3.5% increase in total labor costs
Right.
for 2020.
If I may. So that the 3.5, just so everybody understands it, we've budgeted for 3% of that already in 2020. So that's been included in the preliminary levy that we've done. We're talking really about 0.49% adding that in on that initial year. What this really does is it opens it up on the end. It opens it up so that there's room to grow over the next 4 to 5 years for some employees that might be maxed out. Zach has run the numbers, he's got it up on the PowerPoint. So what we're looking at is really an additional 0.2% in the general fund and an additional 0.29% in the enterprise fund. So the implementation cost above and beyond what we've budgeted for already this year would be $6,500 in the general fund, and whatever the remaining is, it must be around $7,500 in the enterprise funds, across all enterprise funds. So I guess what the moral of that story is that we're pretty close to where we should be as far as the market goes and what we've been planning and how we've been doing COLA every year. We've kind of kept up with the market in order to make a slight market adjustment to our jobs in the current year, 2020. We're talking about some additional funds that would need to be allocated. $6,500 for the general fund and $7,500 for the enterprise funds.
Well, that number's really closer to 27,500, is it not? And then 12,000 of it would be what we'd have to go ahead and take care of as far as the LELS contract.
So that's all included. LELS has been a 3% increase every year, so that's in the contract already. The IUOE group, we're talking about collective bargaining agreements, that's 3% every year too. So it's very close to being on par with what came of the study. So implementation costs, if we would continue the trend of doing COLA every year, is pretty small compared to a large overall salary budget. But right now, for 2020, we've allocated $99,000 as an increase from 2019 to 2020. So the difference would be the
15.
Around $15,000 that are split up between the enterprise fund and the general fund.
Councilmember Thanos.
Alright, so is there a point where we're not doing COLA and we're doing solely performance based on?
I can answer that. That is the plan. So ultimately, this is the first step to a complete merit-based system. Now, keep in mind that the wild card are the collective bargaining agreements, and they may or may not go along with it. There are some collective bargaining agreements that are kind of testing those merit-based pay waters. So I've reached out to Brent. I don't know if you remember him when he came down here for the ULI conference that we had. He's the city manager for Carver. He started this process in Carver. So reached out to him as a resource, and he's going to share those collective bargaining agreements with me that they've developed. And I'll hopefully utilize that as a tool to get us to continue down that path of doing performance merit-based pay in some of our collective bargaining agreements. But in reality, we really only control right now, not through a bargaining agreement, all non-union employees.
So the 99K that we've already got allocated for our 2020 budget, we need an additional 15K, but that's strictly on salary. Do we have any idea what our benefits costs are looking like for 2020?
We do. We've gotten some of those numbers back. Health insurance is up a little bit depending on family versus single, but nothing like what we were seeing when we were in the previous provider. It's in the single digit range, 2 to 5%, something like that. So it's below what we have budgeted for increases. So ultimately, at the end of the day, when we start looking at, and we're looking for direction on this item in particular, but on the 25th of November, when we come back and we're talking about what the levy looks like, remember we adopted a preliminary levy of 9.47%. That number will be lower than that moving forward. So we're hoping to get that between 6 and 7% is what we think it will be. We're still waiting on some numbers, and we're waiting on input on this item as well.
Any questions? Director Dow, did you have anything to offer?
I do not. I was here for questions if any came up. Thank you, though.
I do want to ask one too, but go ahead.
I mean, is there any way to predict or to measure what kind of difference this performance-based pay would do to the budget? I mean, how do you come up with any type of idea of what's that going to change? You understand my question?
Yeah, if I may, feel free to chime in, Leah. But really, what we have, the system that we have right now is guaranteed COLA. So every January 1st, somebody will get an increase of whatever City Council adopts for COLA. Along with if they have steps available and they can get a positive performance review, then they could potentially get a step increase. Now, the only thing we really have control over as management is that step increase and using the performance review process to drive that conversation. So if they're not meeting expectations, and then they wouldn't get their step increase. What if we would move into a complete merit-based, performance-based system is that City Council would adopt a COLA every year, but it wouldn't be automatic. It would just basically take the table, I think it's table 4, increase whatever the starting and end pay is, so that range is still there, but then it's up to the managers to decide where in that range that individual, based on their performance, would get an increase. So there'd be obviously guidance there as far as using our performance management system. It's a scale of 1 to 5. So right now what we say is anything above 3, you're meeting expectations. There would be some guidelines between 3 and 4 that would dictate what kind of percentage you would get. And then you'd also have that percentage increase for the COLA if you wanted to put that into the performance review as well. So an example, getting some kind of confused looks, is so right now if you get a step increase and you get a positive performance review, you get a 2.75% increase. What you could say if you do performance is, well, we're going to give you a 5% increase because you are doing really well and there's this cost of living adjustment. Now, you wouldn't get that until you actually get a review, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get that COLA, so you might maintain that place on that scale if you're a low performing individual. So it puts more onus on the managers to use the performance review software to drive what those increases are. It gives more responsibility to them, and it also puts responsibility on the city council to determine, what does city council feel comfortable to allow management to give for increases. So it's more of a private, I would call it almost like a private model where, let's say we give the public services department $50,000, and then the director can divvy that up to the managers, and the managers, can divvy that up to the employees, however the performance shakes out. So it's more of a static, there's more control over it, and it really puts a lot of emphasis on having high-performing employees.
Yeah, typically you see departments getting a budget, and then they're able to allocate that budget as they see fit. So your range continues to move, your scale would move with a COLA adjustment, but nobody within the range moves until they've gone through the performance evaluation and calculation. So you might have people even with a COLA to the model that don't receive any increase in pay because of performance, and then you can take those funds and allocate them to your higher performers.
When you say no increase in pay, they're still gonna be receiving COLA.
No. When this is all said
How
and
do you
done,
stop that from the union employees?
the unions are always a wild card,
There
but
you
we're
go.
talking about the employees you can control, for instance, okay? So that where you have control over that. Basically, you have a minimum, you have a maximum, and the steps in between disappear. So now you have a range whereby you can apply a COLA to the table without moving anybody that's in the table until you walk them through that performance-based pay increase process. But I worked with Brent on the union negotiations where they did get that through. So I've seen situations where unions have approved open ranges. So
Good to know.
I have one more question.
Please, Councilmember Green.
So, with this system, is the department manager the only one who does the evaluation, or do you have input on that too?
Yeah, I can touch on that, what that all entails. Ultimately, at the end of the day, every single performance review goes through me. I have to do final approval on it. I look at the goals, make sure the goals are, following the criteria that we established, that you need to be able to evaluate them. It can't be something just very broad, like provide better customer service. It has to be something that you can quantify. And then, I look at the overall scoring of, I don't even know how many different questions and criteria there are, but I'll go through the whole thing and look at the comments that both the reviewer, the manager, and the employee look at, so I kind of know what's going on as well. Anything that would be above at normal as far as step increases go would have to be justified through that process and really have to be vetted through multiple people. So, take for example, a streets and parks manager. What they end up doing is they'll evaluate an operator, and then that evaluation will then go to the public services director, and the public services director will give input and sign off on it, and then it'll go to me, and then that'll be the final say on that. So there's multiple tiers of evaluation, and then there's a lot of different criteria that we use.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Please.
I'm looking at, the pages aren't numbered, it's the second to last page, I believe. And it says $114,000 increase.
Yep.
And that's where I'm at. Does that include a 3% COLA for employees next year?
It does.
Okay, I think we need to make that very clear. That is an assumed amount that's in there. It could be less, correct?
It could, yes.
What does that do to your point system?
Oh, nothing. It would not affect pointing. So what we built in there was the data that we have is 2019 data. So before I provide you a proposed step and grade for 2020, where we're saying most cities are doing a 2 or 3%, we just build in the 3%, and that's the cost to implement, so that you're in line already going into 2020,
So
assuming they all.
If we as a council said make it a 2.5, then this $114,000 figure would be reduced.
Maybe. So here's what gets a little weird about a cost to implement. So because it's not a straight 2.5%, we're saying that the cost to implement is take everyone's current wage and move them to the step closest to them without going backwards. So the cost is the difference from where they are today to where that next closest step is. The table, whether it's a 2.5 or a 3% COLA, like I could get you that number easily, but a lot of times I've even had it be more expensive to do a 2.5% COLA than a 3% COLA in some cases, just because of where their current rate, what's the difference between where they are currently to where that next closest step would be. So it's not just a multiple, I guess is my answer there. You've got the delta is what you're calculating between current and next step.
And if I may, the real issue is going from a table with 20 grades and 9 steps to a table with 15 grades and 9 steps, and basically placing people in the current scale to the new scale. It's not a straight 2.5%.
Correct, yeah. If I want to add one point to that, I'd be like, so if I would make $21 an hour now when I move into the next scale, and say the scale for 3% would give me $21.10, I would then get a 10-cent raise and move into the grading step that's 10 cents above where my pay is currently. But if you gave me a 2.5%, that $21.10 would actually be $19.95, which is below my $20.95. It would be below my $21 range. So the next step above me is 22. So then instead of getting a 10-cent raise, I get $1.10 raise or whatever. So that cost implement for the 2.5%. I mean, what Newell's point is that dollar amount is not exactly fit perfectly, because you might make a certain amount and then that step might be shorter. But if you don't do 3%, you give me 2.5%, it's behind me by even a penny. You go to the next step up, which could be the 3.75% between the steps. So that it could be tricky, and that's why we've stuck with the 3%, because that's what was stuck in the budget, what we had preliminarily approved.
Councilmember Felons.
You realize in a whole bunch of words, he said less is more.
Yes. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Davis?
Oh, no.
Okay. We'd like to thank you very much on behalf of the city of Sueur for coming and addressing our city council. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For all the hard
We'll be
work
available if you have any
done.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Just have a question for Jasper. We heard a little bit about this benefit study that's a sidebar to this study. Why would we not have included that with this?
So, if I may answer that, we did talk about this at personnel and budget, and really, the benefit package that we offer as a city is what I would consider comparable to other cities in the area. So, the idea was we'll do a market analysis with the idea that benefits are the same. And we could look into that. Like I would recommend just having staff reach out to some other individuals, but we know that benefits are roughly 25% above what our compensation rate is on average. Like it's 25.3 or something like that. So we could do that if you wanted. We could add that, or we could see if AEM could add that to the component. We could do our own research if we wanted to, but in general, like my instinct is that they're very comparable as far as what we're offering for medical, dental, and then everything else is about equal. Work comp, liability insurance, that thing it's all pretty equal across the board.
Any other questions? What I would like to go ahead and say is that I think that the Personnel Budget Committee's got a few other things that we'd like to go ahead and get addressed. And with that being said, we plan on having a meeting next week to get some of the answers to some of the questions we have, and perhaps what you guys may have as well. So I think that our action right now would be to go ahead and receive Resolution Romeo 2019-031 approving the compensation and classification study, period. And at our next meeting, we should have some additional information. At that point, we could go ahead and direct staff to go ahead and implement it. And that's the results of the personnel budget. So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to that effect. City Administrator approval.
If I may, I would maybe rephrase it just a touch and just say you're going to receive the report, not the resolution. You're receiving the report. and then recommend that it goes back to personnel and budget for any questions that may come up.
Okay. I stand corrected. Go ahead and entertain a motion to receive the report for the compensation and classification study.
So,
Is there a second?
Second,
Any discussion?
I don't think we need to say it, but obviously we're gonna refer it back to
Personnel
P&B,
budget.
personal budget, and we would hope by the next meeting, we would have something to vote on.
Yes.
Also, it'd be helpful if we had our full council here for that important decision.
Exactly. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. And thank you, Director Dowd, for that. And now we'll move on to line item 6, Charlie, which is the 2020 City of Sueur budget review. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, this is the first touch point after the preliminary levy has been passed for the City Council to look at what the Personnel and Budget Committee has been working on. Really, we'll talk about some things related to the general fund levy, but really this is more specific, talking about enterprise funds and really utility rates and what we've come to in just various ways that we've compared these rates to the current rates that we have, and also we've gathered some information about other taxing authorities, the school district, the county, what they're proposing to do, and kind of looking at the overall impact to a resident, what we'll call an average resident. So Director Dowd and myself will kind of team this thing, but really it's we'll let Zach kind of take over, and if there's anything I need to interject, I will. So.
Make sure that we all are using the new handout that we received tonight that shows on page 2 the annual street maintenance increase throughout years 2021 and beyond. So that we're all working from the same document. Director Dowd.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of City Council. Yes, we'll talk about that CIP-CEP updated document at the end of this portion here. So we're just going to go over a little summary here of our total budget review. Personnel and Budget Committee officially kicked off the budget process this year on July 17th. Personnel and Budget Committee has met 6 times in 2019, reviewing and making recommendations to this budget alone. And then the City Council approved a 9.47% preliminary levy increase at the September 12th meeting. If I'm not mistaken, on the date there. And that equates to a 2.48% tax rate decrease. So again, the difference between tax levy and tax rate is that our impact or our tax capacity went up roughly 12.5% or something around that range approximately. And our levy only went up 9.47%, which means our tax rate goes down. So the same value home next year would pay less in taxes than it did in 2019. So just want to make sure that that's clear. Yes.
So back to that number that I said, hopefully we can get that number to 6 to 7%. As far as the preliminary levy increase, that would equate to, let's say if we go 6, that'd be a tax rate decrease of another 3.47%, which is something that we're trying to achieve. So we will whittle it down from the 9.47, just whatever that is, equates to a tax rate decrease overall.
Thank you very much for that point. Yeah, so that will be an additional tax rate decrease, which staff is working through and getting numbers and making sure finalize stuff before we come back in the 25th meeting of November to discuss overall. Major considerations were an addition of a public works operator, an addition of a wastewater and water supervisor position, change in allocation of the community development director, 50% city, 50% EDA. Current 2019 is 75% EDA, 25% city. And then an accurate estimate of pool employee salaries based on the fact that we're going to increase pool hours next year and having proper accommodations for that pool time when we have those open. So those are the overall review items. We'll talk about rates. This is overall we're just trying to get some feedback from everyone at the council here so we can bring back more information on the 25th. So this is not the first time you're seeing it. That's my ultimate goal this year, is to try to get it in front of your eyes and get some feedback before we move forward with stuff and not just spring it on you, which is never good. So overall, essential water rates are changing slightly. So it'll be set up as the left column will show what kind of meter or what kind of service they are getting. The column to the right of that will be the 2019 or the current rate. Third column from, or second column from the right, or third column from the left will be the proposed rate, or what we're, PB&C has approved and moved on to City Council. And then the factor is just our percentage change, which comes from Mankato, correct? If I'm not wrong.
That is correct. So the factor is basically the amount of demand change from meter size to meter size that you can expect to see based on volume and flow rates, things like that. So it's not uniform, but it is representative of, you know, going from a 5/8 inch meter to a 1 inch meter, or 1 to 1.5.
Thank you very much. So in total, as you can see, the 5/8 inch meter, which I'm just going to use as the residential one because that's the most common one in the city, would change from $15 to $20 on an essential water meter. So that's your regular house water meter. So it'd go $5 next year, and your what we call our SAF fee, or basically our fixed fee for those essential water rates. What that fixed fee covers is our bonds, anything that we have to cover, any infrastructure that we have to maintain. That doesn't include any usage. So like that doesn't count treatment costs and costs of, you know, employee hours and such that could be built in if you need additional usage of those things. That we put into the tiered rates, or the rates that we have per 1,000 gallons. So that's how this the city has transitioned that over the last 2 years to make sure we have fees set up based on the reason why we have those fees set up, and not just set up a fee to cover our total cost. We want to make sure we have baseline of why we have that fee, and behind, just get the information behind there. The tiered rates, currently we have a $4 per 1,000 gallons, no matter how many gallons you use. If you use 10,000, 100,000, or a million gallons, you are billed $4 per 1,000 gallons in 2019. In 2020, those per 1,000 gallons will drop for most, or I should say majority of our residents in town. 0 to 10,000 gallons will be $3.25 per 1,000. 10,000 to 20,000 will be $3.75 per 1,000 gallons. So again, you're lowering your rates from anything under 20,000 gallons will be less per 1,000 gallons than it is currently. And 20,000 and up will be $4.25, or a quarter more than it is currently today per 1,000 gallons. We are switching to the tiered rates versus just a straight usage rate. And that's direction from the DNR based on water conservation ideas and proposals and such from the DNR and Minnesota Department of Health, that they're trying to, you know, maybe not use as much water, so they're trying to create tiered rates for those, I would say, super conservative or high users of those water usage. Our non-essential water rates, which is the far right table here, is our water sprinkler meters. So those are people that are having a water meter or a water sprinkler meter for their outside line irrigation or outside spigot. And currently we charge the same amount, $15, for you to have that meter in your house, no matter if you use it or not. Next year we're proposing to change that to $5. And the reason why is that's the cost of the equipment to have it in your house. For us to buy a water meter over 15 years of the life, it's going to cost us $5 a year. So that's roughly $120 for 30, 60, $75 for 15 years of service. That's how much a water meter costs for us to buy and to operate until it goes bad. So $5 per month. So it brings you down those winter costs by $10 per month when you're not using that at all. But we are implementing the tiered rates again. Again, water sprinkler meters are charged the same $4 per 1,000 gallons. It will not be next year 0 to 20,000 gallons, will be $5 per 1,000. And again, this is all related to Minnesota DNR, because the DNR basically does not want you to water your lawn as much as you like to keep it green. The DNR doesn't like wasting water on lawns, so they are trying to implement tiered rates as much as possible, and we are getting pushed from them to do this. So then it would be $6 per 1,000 from 20 to 40,000 gallons, and then above 40,000 gallons would be $7 per 1,000 gallons.
City Administrator.
I'll talk a little bit about the tiered rates, just because it's new, but really what we're preparing for, we're going through a water supply plan study right now. We're anticipating the need to install another water well, another water supply well. What we'd like to do, the most productive aquifer that's under the city of Sueur is the Mount Simon aquifer. It's the deepest aquifer. The DNR does not like to issue permits. Minnesota Department of Health doesn't like to issue permits for this aquifer. But if we implement what are called conservation rates or tiered rates, the likelihood of them doing that is much higher. So this is something that they would likely request that we do if we don't already have it in place. It makes a lot of sense as far as if you're a normal customer, you're gonna actually see a reduction in your usage cost. But really what we're doing is we're trying to anticipate what some of the requests are going to be to do some of the water infrastructure work that we're gonna need to do. One question that you might get is, well, I used to pay $15 a month for my non-essential, now you have it down to $5. Why can you do that? The answer is because we're implementing these tiered rates. And one of the things, feedback that we got from the Minnesota Department of Health and DNR is that if we don't have tiered rates or conservation rates, the meter charges between an essential meter and a non-essential meter should be the same. But because we're changing it from a straight water rate to tiered rates, then we can do that. We can then charge less for that meter, but then we're charging a little bit more for those the usage on that non-essential meter too. So it's a trade-off, and it all depends. You really as a consumer have control, especially with our new meter system. When that's rolled out, you'll really be able to, if you choose to micromanage your water consumption and really watch it on a daily basis if that's what you choose. But really we put more control in the consumer's hands by having these tiered rates. You can make the choice to go to the next tier if you want, or keep your usage at a certain tier.
I have a quick question. The software that goes along with the meters,
Yes.
is that part of this charge? What's paying for that?
That's incorporated in this charge, yes. So,
Okay.
yeah, so that's incorporated in the budget to cover those costs of that new patient. So it's not going to be any additional charge to anybody.
Understood. Now Jasper just mentioned
Yes.
the need for a new well. That's not part of this charge, correct?
That is part of the capital improvement, capital equipment plan,
So
which we'll talk about.
make it clear.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you for clarification. Any questions on water rates overall? How we came up with the water rates? Any questions on the, how the calculations come up or anything else? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Did we forget sewer somewhere? Sewer? There we go. Okay, let's talk about sewer, because that's the next thing that's related to water, because everything you use in water, at least in your residential home, gets charged for sanitary sewer. That's how the rate schedules are set up. So currently, again, we'll use the 5/8 inch meter, because that's our 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter, because that's what most of our residents are. We go from $20 again in 2019 to $25. It's a $5 increase. But the flat rate, or the rate per 1,000 gallons of usage, would drop from $13.50 to $12.85. The reason why we can do that again is because we're upping that fixed cost that we're going to get no matter what of $25 based on our fees and what we need in the budget to cover no matter what. And then the treatment costs for that are based on how much you actually use. So we can reduce those costs a little bit based on better efficiency, and then overall just having better knowledge of what we actually need to treat that sanitary sewer. So we would drop it 85 cents, or take that back, 65 cents for 1,000 gallons of water.
Yeah, 65 cents. City administrator.
I'll just add that, so the accessibility fee, the sanitary accessibility fee that you see on there for $25, let's fast forward 7 years, our PFA loan payments fall off. That 8th year, you would see a large reduction in that accessibility fee, because that's a fixed cost, and that fixed cost would then go away. I'm not going to say that we might not have additional fixed costs, but we likely won't have a fixed cost the size of a full wastewater treatment plant after that payment's done. So that's one thing to watch, and one thing you will see is that we're going to be transitioning over the next few years to reduce the usage fee and increase the access fee. That's one of the things the Personnel and Budget Committee looked at as far as an option goes. This was the option that we fell on, and this option also covers half of the depreciation, not the full depreciation. We'll look at this again next year and see if it makes sense to cover 100% of the depreciation or not. But that was the direction as far as looking at the overall bill, and we'll look at that in a few slides ahead. But looking at the overall bill and the increase from 2019 to 2020 to the consumer. What we came up with was covering half the depreciation would be more palatable to the community than covering it all, and we'll evaluate it next year.
And we currently we cover about a tenth of the depreciation currently, so, I mean, it's that. So, it is a change, we're doing another step program to solely implement this again, which has kind of been the motto of the council since we've started making changes to these things. Was previously mentioned by the mayor in the copy class study, so. Any questions on sanitary sewer overall? I think we're headed in the right direction. Again, in 7 years when we don't have $1 million+ in a bond payment every year, that helps significantly on our fixed costs. Let's talk about electric. I guess you have to go back to both things. You must have put those in reverse order there. There we go. So this is the fixed charge. We'll start with the fixed charge first off. Again, left column 2019 actual, right column 2020 proposed, and the demand factor, or rated demand factor again. So the rural, again, residential, we'll talk about that because that's again most of our residents in town. It would be $8 in 2019, so it would be a 50-cent increase to $8.50 in 2020, which is the proposed amount. The most you'll see is $5 or $10, which is on the interdepartmental, which is within the city, and then $5 on large industrial in time of use, which is our largest users in town. Otherwise, the franchise fee. So we are increasing the franchise fee to 10/1000ths of a penny to just continue that trend of trying to get to the $500,000 mark that we are supplementing the general fund with. Currently, the 0.0042 cents per kilowatt hour covers, is it 400 or 400,000? I think
It's right over 400,000 is what that covers.
right now the electric fund is supplementing the general fund in order to keep taxes down by $500,000. We've done that historically for many years, and that's kept our general fund taxes down. That's a gigantic increase in taxes if we had to cover that completely and just leave the $500,000 in the electric fund. So we're very gracious to have the electric fund, and we continue to try to cover that $500,000 by using the franchise fee to cover that.
About 1% for every 23,000, isn't that how it pretty much works out?
Correct.
That we'd have to increase taxes.
Yeah, 23 to 25, you have something like that.
Administrative approval.
One thing I'll mention, it was discussed in detail at personnel and budget, is the idea of making the franchise fee more equitable throughout the city. There's portions of the city that are under Minnesota Valley Electric Cooperative service territory. 2020, one of the goals that's going to be established with our electric department is to figure out how to acquire that, what it would cost, and then have city council take action on that. Because there's some vacant land that's in there, and there's also land on Doppy Lane and Woods Drive that are Minnesota Valley Electric Cooperative service territory that we would look at acquiring too. If that would be the case, then they would then have the franchise fee on their bill, and then it would be what we could consider more equitable, as everybody within the city limits would then be paying some sort of franchise fee.
Correct. The other fee that we are looking at adding next year is an underground conversion fee. What this is it's 1/1000th of a penny, and what this will do is create a larger fund for us to underground conversion, the overhead power lines to be underground, so they're no longer having any issues. That this also be used to convert some of the older underground electrical that is just run by bare wire in the ground and not through conduit. Be able to redo those projects much quicker at a quicker pace. Currently we spend, correct me if I'm wrong, $175,000 a year to do the underground conversion. And this would be able to do larger, close to $1 million in a few years, amounts of projects, which would make it much quicker for us.
And this applies to everybody, not just those that have the overhead underground conversion.
Correct. This is an overall fee that would go on everyone's bill next year to basically speed up that underground conversion process and or correct what was done in the past at a much quicker pace.
One thing I wanted to clarify, there's two different things. City Council adopted a program that allows residents to apply for, call it a grant, to convert their service line from the transformer to their house. That's a different
project altogether, this underground conversion fee would just go for the overall infrastructure, the main lines being converted from overhead lines to underground. To consider this, $175,000 a year gets you roughly 4 to 6 blocks of conversion. What we're looking to generate with this is roughly around 450 to 500,000, I think, a year. Now that initial 175 will come out of this, but then everything else, what we're going to do is have that go into an underground conversion fund, and then every couple of years do a project and do a larger project, 12 to 20 blocks, something like that, and contract that out, go out for bid, and have somebody do that annually, and that'll really expedite the process to convert our overhead to underground.
And just going back to the underground fee for all, even though we have parts of the sewer that have had the underground conversion done, there are some issues with some of that conversion, is that correct?
Correct, yes, yep. So the idea would we would correct those issues with using these funds.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the charges, basically started or the static charges and implementation of the underground conversion fee and or franchise fee small increase? Hearing none, we'll move on to the usage or your kilowatt hour charges. So, kilowatt hour charges are actually going down next year based on what we received from MMPA, or which is where we receive our power from. You'll see a slight decrease in the per kilowatt hour charge you're going to be charged from 2019 to 2020. The only exception to that is the demand in the summer usage, which only applies to our time of use customers. Currently, we are only covering basically at charge. We are making $0 on demand if you are using demand in the summer. So we get charged $14.80. That's what you are getting charged is $14.80. So again, this was identified by the council last year that we were under basically supplementing the demand for the summer hours, summertime demand rates for our large industrial users, and they use lots and lots of power, so we were supplementing that at a large rate. So we did another step program within the PB&C and within the overall council to step that and do basically get it at charge and then apply our 10% overhead on top of that for 2020 to do another step program to not be such a hard impact on our large industrial users. So that will change from 14.80 to 16.59, and again, most of that has to do with the fact that we're adding a 10% charge on it, but it's also because demand in the summer is the highest for our large industrial users, especially with air conditioning, and we have an increase from MMPA on those ones. But other than that, every other fee that you get per kilowatt hour has decreased throughout the city. Any questions on the per kilowatt hour charges? Hearing none. We talked about sanitary sewer, stormwater. So in 2017, going into 2018, the city council and city staff proposed and approved a stormwater rate in order to bank money ready for the 2020-2021 project of CASA 22 turnback project. No, it's CASA 22. And we are still implementing that process. So we have, again, done the step program with this. It started off slow and then kept slowly implementing this to an amount that we're getting to be able to bank enough money in order so that we don't have a impact from a tax levy. Previous to the stormwater fund, you paid for everything that was stormwater related out of your general fund tax levy. So you had to pay that and our taxes would go up. So in preparation for the big project that we knew was going to happen, we said we don't want to impact people's tax levy in that year because we would have such a large increase in the taxes. You'd see probably a 5 to 6% increase in levy just for that project alone, if not more. The city council took proactive action, which city staff was recommended, and that was very smart in my eyes from that area. So we are following that plan from $8 to $9.50 for the base rate. Again, this is the step that was $6.50, if I'm not mistaken, right in 2018, $8 in 2019, and then $9.50 in 2020. So that would change from a majority of our users have less than a half acre. So it'll go from $6 to $7.13, which is based on I cannot remember that calculation. It's the amount of acreage times by the base rate times by some sort of rough charge or something. I can't remember what the other charge is on that. Jeff?
Yeah, it's a rough charge. So basically, the ref is the 0.5 times times 9.5 times. Draw a blank here.
I'm trying to blank on that, what the
Third
rough
factor
charge
was.
But it's a set rate that's set for everyone, it's a rough charge, so basically you take your acreage times by the rough charge times by the base rate to get the total charge that you actually receive in the city. So that's based on how much residential equivalent factor you have in land. So if somebody with more land would have more stormwater usage, then that person would be smaller. Any questions on stormwater? Again, this is stepping towards our idea that 2021 we'll be able to fund a project CASA 22 without having any tax levy increase. Be able to bond for that.
That's very
If I may, the plan that we implemented initially ends as far as the base rate, recommendations at $12.50, so that we plan to have 2 more $1.50 jumps in the stormwater, and then at $12.50, the idea is to evaluate the program and see what the need is and adjust it accordingly. So, but don't take the plan as gospel. You can adjust that based on outside factors as well. But that was what we initially came up with originally.
Refuse rates. So this is something that we don't have a whole lot of control over because we are supplement to waste management increases from what they have up to 5% or CPI, whichever is less. They are increasing by 2% to follow CPI, which is the only change that you'll see. You won't see any change in the admin or the tax rate. The tax only changes based on how much you pay for your refuse or for your recycling, but the recycling will change by about 6 cents and the refuse 35 cents or so for just the 96 gallon container, using that as probably the most common container. So that is again just a 2% increase that we're just passing on from waste management. We're collecting no more dollars for that as a city. We're still collecting $2.45 for admin fees. So the only amount that we actually keep is that admin charge for refuse, which is just handles phone calls and questions and comments and helping them get their refuse taken care of.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Just a quick question on that. Why is the admin fee different depending on what size you have? If that's what it's used for.
It is, yep.
It originally was conceived as a percentage of the base rate is what it was. So I'm not sure what that is, but
To me, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if we're using it for true administration fees, taking phone calls,
That's
taking
correct.
concerns,
Yep.
it doesn't cost any different for me holding a 96 gallon. I mean, I pay more for that phone call holding a 96 gallon container than Councilmember Kirby might have for a 32 gallon. And that, to me, that doesn't make sense.
yeah, if you remember, 2 years ago we made an adjustment to this following that because what happened was the rates were increased but admin fees weren't. What we did is we just followed the original pay scale. If we want to change it, we can. If we want it to be whatever the average is per account, really it generates about $10,000 a year to cover the admin costs. However we get there, we can adjust that. If we want it to be a flat fee of $2 or whatever it would be per account, we could look at that if that's something that we
I think it's just how it was originally set up.
But yes, to me, I mean, it should be the same across the board because the customer's paying. It doesn't matter what size container I have, you're doing the same amount of work on our end.
Yeah, we could certainly put it as an agenda item for the next personnel budget committee to go ahead and address.
Yeah. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, like I said, there's this set up back in I think 2014 or 2015 when we first signed the agreement with Waste Management, and we haven't changed it much besides adjusting the dollar amount of more admin costs that cost, but we just adjust the whole percentage up.
What we can do, if I may, is just figure out how many accounts we have, how much money we need to generate, and just do a straight division problem and figure out what that monthly admin fee should be, and we could look at that.
Right.
Excellent question. Any other questions on refuse before we move on?
You know, if I may, I think if I remember how we did this, I think it had to do with how we wanted to go ahead and discount the seniors. And when we came up with that $1.30, we had to go ahead and make an increase for the 296 gallon ones, and maybe I'm not correct on that, but I thought it had something to do that we wanted to go ahead and encourage people to use smaller refuse containers and also to go ahead and think about our senior population.
So we are supplementing the senior rate by whatever that,
Right.
because we are getting charged $8.78 for a 32 gallon, whether you're a senior or not. We are giving a discounted rate to any senior that goes on that. So that was I know that for sure was
Yeah,
an
that's-
initiative of the council when we did sign that agreement.
But I'm not exactly sure how we came up with those other numbers, other than the fact we had to back into the 10,000 somehow for the administrative costs.
Right, and I would expect if I have 2 containers that I'm gonna pay more.
Right.
I mean, I understand that, and I understand the senior discount. But I just don't understand the variation in the other ones, because, I mean, I shouldn't be any different from my neighbor.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to administration costs, if that's truly what we're using that for, it should be equal across the board.
You're right.
Okay. Yeah, well, most certainly can evaluate that. That's something PDNC wants to look at. Okay. Look at the overall budget now, just to give you an overall picture of what we've just talked about and discussed. Again, I'm using an average utility bill. Again, this is like a 5/8 or a 3/4 inch meter, which I've mentioned in most of them, which is a majority of our residents. A half-acre lot, which is the majority of our residents as well. And I believe I used a 96 gallon container, because I believe that's the average one we use. Go back to my notes here. Yes, and a 96 gallon refuse. Yep. So 2019, you'd see about a $228.20 bill if you were using 450 kilowatt hours and 6,000 gallons. In 2020 proposed, based on the changes in rates, you'd see $233.77, a difference of $5.55 after all the changes that we've adjusted in rates. Again, that will change drastically based on your usage. So if you are a 10,000 gallon user, it's going to be much different than if you are a 2,000 gallon user as well. So we just, again, use the average of 6,000 gallons. But again, if you use 40,000 gallons, then you're going to be paying drastically a lot with those tiered rates in the water that we're looking at. But so we're just using an average here to kind of give you an overall utility bill of changes. So, any question on the overall utility bill and the $5.57 increase in total? Hearing none. So PB&C tasks myself with reaching out to the county and the school district to see what their tax rates are, what their proposed preliminary tax levies are. The school district obviously is a tough one because they can't really pass a tax levy. They have to have everything done by referendum, or a majority of their funding comes from referendum. They have a small portion that's actually taxable, and they collect about 18% or something like that. It's very, very small. But most of their funding comes from referendum, so it's hard for me to do anything there. But I used what I got from Kai at the school district. He was very, very helpful, and I used those as implementation costs to figure out what's your overall utility bill plus the tax increase for next year for a home. So I will use my little sheet, but you can follow up there. I don't have any colors. We'll go with the top one. So basically, I looked at a home value of $189,100 in 2019, and I said if your home didn't change value at all, what would happen to your overall utility bill and your overall taxes? So utility bill doesn't change because utility bill is going to be the same as an average, $228 to $233, which on the year is $2738 versus $2805. But your taxes do change. So with the city having a decrease of 2.48% in the tax rate, the county actually has a tax rate increase for the year. And then the school district would have a slight tax rate decrease again because they follow the same tax capacity that the city does. So with no changes in their tax levy, or their tax levy going up very, very minimally, they would see a small decrease as well. So on a monthly basis, you'd see a total change of $4.18. That includes your utility bill and your taxes broken down on a monthly basis. And then yearly basis would be total change is $50.10, or a total percent of 0.88%. So I did look at it and say, if we had no utility rate increases, just say what can we control, what we can't control, because we can control the utility rates, but the taxes are kind of out of our control, besides our own. You'd see a $1.40 decrease in a month and $16.75 decrease in the whole year. And again, that's if your home did not change value. My assumption is that most homes did change value with a 12.5-ish% tax capacity increase within the city overall. Again, that's average. Some will see more, some will see less, but that's the average. And that's what I used to apply the $189,100 times by the 12% to get you a $211,792 home in 2020. So taking that into consideration, your utility bill is not going to change based on the value of your home, but your city taxes will, about $10 or so. County taxes are going to go up drastically more than that because they're going to increase whether you have your home increase in value or not. And then school taxes will increase based on the fact that your value of your home increased. So you'll see a total change of about $33.51 for a month, and about $402.08 for the year. Total percent change about 7%. Overall increase based on your home value increasing 12%, which I think is pretty reasonable. If your home value increases 12%, that's not too bad. But again, something we can't control is those taxes. So total change with no utilities is about $27.94. So even if we did no utility rate increases, talking about a $27 increase in your monthly bill no matter what. There's nothing we can control besides our own tax portion, which is about $10 of that. And then total change for the year is $305 without us doing anything at all. So I wanted to illustrate that because some things are out of our control that we can't do much about. I mean, again, our taxes and our utility bills are something we can't control, but we can't control what the county does and we can't control what the school district does. So kind of pulling those two things out of the equation gives a better picture of what we can actually control on a monthly and a yearly basis. Any questions on the overall utility bill, overall taxes? I think it was a great exercise for myself and for the council and PB&C to see that overall bill because it shows the total picture because not everyone gets a raise every year or not everyone gets, a bonus every year or whatever, and we can look at those things and evaluate those on an overall picture. CIP-CEP. I may refer to Jasper on this because he's kind of the man of the hour with the CIP-CEP thing. I just make it ready and that's the new updated one here for you.
Yeah, if I may, I don't intend to go through this line item by line item, but take a look at it. This is very similar to everything that we've shared before with the city council and with personnel and budget. One thing you will see is items that are 2 to 4 years or 2 to 5 years out. Looking at those, understand that those are planning items. Those are by no means approved. They're not going to happen. They'll be looked at on an annual basis. Essentially, having a 5-year CIP gives city council, gives the public an idea of what things are on the horizon. One thing I will add one thing I will mention that was added was city council chamber AV upgrade. So one thing that we have here with our franchise fee is we have this thing called a PEG fee that we can only spend on infrastructure like cameras and microphones and things like that. One thing that I think is important that we strive for, and I'll fully admit is a challenge, is communicating with the public. And this is one of the forums that we can communicate to the public. It's one of the most heavily used ways that people watching our city council meetings. I think it's important that we have a good quality product that's out there. Right now we have kind of this makeshift system that works. It works okay. Sometimes there's some snags, but really what we would use is those PEG dollars to get something that would be more professional, a better end product. People would be able maybe to hear better. That's one of the complaints I get occasionally, is that it's difficult to hear people. Working through some of those bugs that we've kind of just makeshift done a system that works okay. But using some of those PEG dollars, no tax impact, but we would be looking to add some cameras to the city council chambers.
Public education and government.
There we go. Public education and government grant money. So it's associated with our franchise fee. I think it's 85 cents per account per month is how those funds are generated. One thing I will note, the change that we have in here is just the future allocations for the annual street maintenance and increasing that $50,000 a year over the next 5 years. Eventually what we're going to do is we're going to have a comprehensive street maintenance plan, basically looking at every street in Sueur and coming up with a plan for every block and when that's going to be repaired and how we work it into the budget. It'll be very comprehensive. One thing to note is that this allocation of $450,000 this year and $50,000 each year for maintenance, some of those funds will get used to do some of those larger projects, and we've talked about that in the past. But really, I think the intent of city council and personnel and budget is to make sure that we are allocating funds for streets, and I think that's what we're doing, and I think we're we have a good plan to implement that in the future. Other than that, everything else is pretty straightforward. Just take a look at it. If you do have questions about a certain project, let me know.
we can talk about it at the next meeting. By no means does a capital improvement plan mean that it's an adopted item. It does need to go through the proper channels and follow our purchasing policy to actually buy it. So, some of these items that you see for the enterprise fund, such as the Doppy Lane Hill water main, I believe. Yep, Doppy Lane water main, $550,000. I think everybody's aware there was a water main leak. We don't know for how long that was actually occurring. It actually surfaced this year, but it could have been happening for a slow leak for years or months or days or weeks or whatever. We don't actually know. But as soon as we saw that it was surfacing, we started investigating. One thing that we've noticed is that this area, if this could happen again, it's not a good situation because we don't have proper as-built for that water main. So we don't know exactly where it is. That's why if you looked at the process or you were in the area, you saw us going, or our contractor going about every 40 feet and using a big vac truck, like similar to the one that we authorized to be purchased next year, going down, finding the water main, kind of looking at the direction that it was going, and then going 40 more feet, finding it again, and trying to find that leak. So we have since GPS those locations so we know where they are, but there's 90% of the hill, up the hill, that we don't know exactly where that water main is. So what this project would do would be slip lining that water main to be able to make sure and ensure that it's not going to leak or be damaged. So a large project. I hope it doesn't cost that much. So take a look. Really, this is just to get this in front of City Council and get some questions, get City Council brainstorming about some of these projects that we have on the horizon.
I'm gonna add one thing quick. I did add a footnote or a little asterisk by the ones that the council has, and that is noted that it's contingent on funding from an outside source. So just let you know that we're not doing that project unless we get contingent on funding from an outside source. So that's what that little asterisk means. It is on page 4 at the end of your little packet. So
There's 3 of them. There's the taxiway extension with utilities.
Yes.
There's the one associated with the ice arena, acoustic
Yes.
panels, and then the outdoor pickleball court.
and then there's the Bruce Frank
Bruce
field.
Frank.
Yeah, so
Oh,
there should be
Bruce
4 of
Frank
them.
Field, 4 of them, I'm sorry.
So those projects are not gonna move forward at all. You won't even come in front of council unless we have outside funding. Once they come from outside funding, we have the funding sources secured and ready to go, then we will bring that forward to council to approve. Again, just emphasizing that none of these projects, by looking at this or approving this at the, again, it's a plan and not a for sure set in stone. So everything one of these projects has to come back based on the purchasing policy of the city.
Councilmember Devils.
I think it's important to comment on the annual street maintenance for those that may not know this. Previously, what was allocated for annual street maintenance was only like $30,000, if I'm not mistaken, or it's $50,000, which obviously wasn't enough to keep up, maintain, and take care of the streets that we have, which is why they're in the condition that they're in now. So, let's see, for 2019, wasn't it started in 2017, for 2018 and 2019, we had the increases for it.
Correct.
Which is why we're seeing the amount of repairs and the size of the repairs that we have now, because of the way that we've been planning for it.
So,
With that, if I may, next steps, looking for feedback from City Council on basically the CIP utility rates in general. It sounds like we're going to have a personnel and budget committee meeting sometime next week to iron out some of the refuse stuff and the comp and class item. Look at that. We're looking to come back to City Council on the 25th, do a kind of a mock preliminary or mock final levy adoption, go through what you'll see on the 9th, make sure everybody feels comfortable with it. And then on December 9th itself, we'll notice the public hearing, the truth and taxation public hearing, so people can come in and give their input about the budget, and then consider adoption of the 2020 budgets and final levy. I will note on the 25th, we will bring forward a revised governmental fee schedule, kind of our fees that we have as a city as well. We're looking to reformat some of our utility rates, like our packet that we have, to make that a little bit more user-friendly, to find where the applicable rate is. If you're a residential customer, basically having one sheet that somebody can look at instead of 15 sheets. So we're looking at reformatting some of those things. We may have it by the 25th. We may not, but we're gonna continue to work on it. So yeah, just continue to provide information. Make sure that if you do have questions, you're asking them, and we can help address those. We will and we can sprinkle in personnel and budget committee meetings wherever we feel it's necessary to address any specific issues. But yeah, really, we're just looking for feedback moving forward.
Are you planning on having the calculator that you put together last year, so a resident would be able to come on in and, basically pull up their account and figure out what the new bill would look like for them specific?
Correct, yeah. So there's actually a utility billing calculator on our website that you can plug in your information and say, well, I have a 5/8 inch meter. I use 2,000 gallons per month, 400 kilowatt hours, and it'll tell you what your new bill will be. So pretty handy little tool. Once we get those adopted, then we can probably implement it, or we can look at implementing it based on what we've gotten for feedback so far.
Perfect. What I would like to ask the members of City Council then would be to go through this. It's an awful lot of information, we realize that, but go through it. If anything comes to mind, certainly drop Jasper an email regarding what your question or concern might be, and we'll address it next week at the Personnel Budget Committee meeting, and that way when we get together on the 25th, we should have everything all ready to go, like he says, like a mock type of presentation in preparation for December 9th when we have to finalize. Fair enough? Okay.
All right, yeah, no action is requested, and if there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next agenda.
Okay. Everybody's got anything? Okay, good to go. We'll move on to 6 Delta then. The certified delinquent utility and accounts receivable accounts. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, on October 14th, we held a public hearing for the public to be invited in to dispute any delinquent utility bills or accounts that they may have. If you remember, there was nobody that came into that meeting to dispute it. The initial amount that we flagged as delinquent was around $442,000. The current amount flagged as delinquent, and that's being requested through this resolution to be certified, totals $290,799.02. Of that, the utility accounts make up $283,196.56, and the accounts receivable accounts total $7,602.46. Now the accounts receivable accounts, a question was asked, what are those? Really what those are for our fire service going out to a call, us sending them an invoice for that based on our governmental fee schedule, and those not being paid. Some of those get hung up in the insurance world, but they're invoices that are past due that meet the criteria to be certified. So that makes up most of those. The utility accounts, those are straight utility usage, your electric, water, wastewater, stormwater. So I'll entertain any questions about this, but what we're looking for, there's a resolution in your packet. It's resolution 2019-032. What this allows us to do is certify these to the tax roll. This is something that we've done every year since this has been implemented in, I think it was adopted in 2016 and it was first done in 2017. So this will be our third time doing this. In the past, what the city has done is they've written off a lot of these charges. So our revenue recapture rate is, I think, around at 95%. So of this money, we can expect to receive payment over time, not immediately, but over time, of roughly 95% of that amount, which is a good thing because that in turn keeps utility rates lower. If we weren't able to recapture this, that revenue source wouldn't be there.
For the accounts receivable, you mentioned that a lot of it has to do with, fire and, I guess, collecting the monies from the insurance. Is that number as high as it is because of maybe a fire happening later in the year and you have to close the books? And that number's gotta be.
No, roughly it's around $1,000 per call minimum if you
Okay.
get called out. So this would be 7 or 8 calls roughly that would go unpaid. So and let's say you get called out to a fire, you would go to the fire, you have a minimum of 1 hour, and then after every additional hour, there's a charge to that as well. So really, it's an accumulation. I don't think there's that many that are delinquent. I think it's just that the amounts are higher because of that initial $1,000 charge.
Any idea how long it usually takes for an insurance company to settle up with the homeowners?
It's usually fairly quickly. Sometimes there's things out there that are out of our control.
I would say on average probably about 3 months, 3 to 6 months. So these are any accounts that are older than July 31st of this year. So these are, unfortunately, we have not certified accounts receivable accounts in probably 3 years. Maybe our first year might have done it, but since then we have not really done that. So this does include some lawn mowing, some nuisance calls and stuff, but most of it has to do with fire calls because we haven't certified those in over 3 years. So I'm going through and cleaning up the books as I'm getting through things. And in total, we had about $57,000 of accounts receivable accounts that were delinquent that I'm writing off. 50 of that is because they are not within the Sueur County, so they might be somebody passing through on 169 and have a fire on their, whatever, or they hit a transformer pole and that costs $8,000, which we have a few of those, and they don't live within the Sueur County, so we are not able to certify taxes to them. So we have to send them to another source of collection, whether that's revenue capture, which is up to the state, and or a collection agency. So based on those items, we have to write off those until we get collection on those. And the recapture rate on that is much lower, 50, if not below that, if not 25% on those collections we're writing off. So $7,000 is minor of the accounts receivable accounts that we can actually collect on because they're within the Sueur County.
Good information. I was not aware, so.
Yeah, it's a very difficult process to do accounts receivable, and we do it, and not everyone does, but I could say I'm pretty happy with the utility accounts this year being at 283 when we started at 442. Again, that's anything that's older than just July 31st, but just to make aware that we do send a letter out in September, and then we have the notice again that goes out in the beginning of October, and then we do the certification again in November. So there's multiple, we're reaching out multiple times to let them know that it's going to go to taxes, And I've had multiple people come in and work with us and get it paid up or multiple payments over small times, and that's great. So that's what our whole goal is as the city, is not have to do this. It's not fun for anybody to do it. But this is anything July 31st. So then if your account is then delinquent, let's say in September, and it wasn't delinquent in July, you don't go to taxes. And then we roll into next year on July 31st of the next year, then we actually start paying taxes if you're still delinquent at that point.
Administrator Griggle.
One thing with our new utility billing software we're going to be able to do is we're going to have a conversation at City Council about how we want to handle this in the future. Right now, we just let it roll. If they're delinquent, we just let them keep using energy, using water. What we'll talk about is going back to the process that we used to do where we'd shut the power off. The meters that were swapped out 6 years ago for electric, 6 to 3 years ago for electric, don't allow you to remotely shut off power. The new meters will. So if we'll be looking at a delinquent utility bill account policy to give us some guidance as far as what we can do if we want to go down that route. They both have pros and cons. This method, you really rack up a large amount, but you recapture it over time. The method where you shut the energy off or electricity off, you'll get a more immediate response payment, but you'll also have interaction with your administrative staff, with people that aren't very happy. So it's this way I would say is more passive aggressive. We do recapture most of it over time, but our landlords, I'll just tell you, our landlords in town would prefer the method where we're shutting the power off on the tenants, because that's the biggest complaint with this method is that landlords end up fronting the bill and it gets certified to their taxes for what a tenant runs up in a utility bill. We've had the conversation here that landlords should have good tenants that pay their bills living in their residences. So we'll open up that discussion. The plan is to do it sometime before April 15th, I believe, is the end of the winter rules. With the idea that we would implement a new policy if we choose to. We don't have to after April 15th, just so that there's winter rules. There's some regulations as far as what we can do.
And the new billing software goes active on the 10th of February, if I remember correctly.
Correct, yes.
So that gives us a couple of months of data to go ahead and evaluate also to see where we're at, and we can use that information as we're setting the policy.
Correct, exactly, yep. So what we are looking for tonight is just a motion approving resolution R 2019-032, certification of delinquent utility accounts, receivable accounts.
With that said, I'll entertain a motion then to approve resolution Romeo 2019-032, certification of delinquent utility accounts to the total of $283,196.56, and delinquent account receivable accounts to a total of $7,602.46 to the Sueur County for collection in 2020.
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. We now move on to 6 ECHO, which is the 2019-2020 goals and staff priorities review. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, before you is an item just for an update, discussion, just a placeholder as far as where we're at on some of our goals. You'll see our goals are published, they're on our wall here at City Council. They've been given out to all the directors so that they can post them in their respective facilities. And really, we have a pretty robust list of goals. We adopted 12 of them for the year 2019 through 2020. What I've done is I've gone through each of the goals in somewhat of detail in the packet itself, and kind of went through as far as where we are in progress. And I'll touch briefly on that once we get further into this item. But in general, what we've done here in the process that we've adopted to adopt these goals, we have a sheet that's really tied exclusively to our comprehensive plan in the overbearing themes of our comprehensive plan, and really affiliating those themes with the various goals and assigning those to make sure that our goals align well with our comprehensive plan. I think it's safe to say that everybody honors the comprehensive plan. It's something that people have worked very hard to adopt and to implement. And really, City Council is really keeping it in the forefront of their thoughts as far as some of our goals that we have. So, some of those overbearing themes, I'll just mention them so everybody knows: fiscal responsibility, customer service, planning for the future, land use, infrastructure, transportation, parks, recreation, and open space, volunteerism, partnerships, official controls, capital improvement plans, economic development, housing, and parks and trails. So pretty robust list, but we really, I think, done a good job of kind of spreading it across the board. So I'll go through each of the goals just briefly. If there's anything that you'd specifically like to talk about, we definitely can. We'll obviously be looking at these at the council retreat, whatever that is, generally at the end of January is when we schedule that. We'll look at this. We'll likely be further along on some of these, as these have, we've made good progress on some, and some, we'll definitely be working on them into 2020, and some they'll actually never go away. They'll pretty much always be there. So they'll be repetitive goals. So I'll start off, and I'll just give a brief description of it and where we're at, and then we can feel free to chime in as a city council if you have specific questions. But the first goal that we have is to finalize the zoning code update and amend the updated zoning map to the 2040 comprehensive plan. As everyone is aware, we have adopted that zoning code update, chapters 152 and 153 of the city code, and we are working on getting that amended through amended to the comprehensive plan. What we've done is, we have a zoning map. You can see it in the back of the city council chambers, but that will be the actual map that gets adopted to the comprehensive plan. What that process looks like is planning commission will make a recommendation to city council. We actually hold a public hearing on any amendments to the comprehensive plan. I believe that public hearing actually happens at the planning commission, and then there's a recommendation to city council, and then city council adopts any changes, and then it becomes active. So we're going to be doing various amendments. You'll see a future land use, a priority growth area, a transportation plan, utility plan. Those things over the next year we hope to amend to the comprehensive plan. The idea is that we get a good working document, a living document that we can use as reference when something comes up, like we want to open up a road, or we have a development that wants to develop in a certain part of town. We can actually utilize our comprehensive plan, go to these various things that have been adopted and say, well, here's our comprehensive plan, we've looked at it, it's been vetted, this is what the vision is for the community. So ultimately that's what we're going to strive to get. You know, our comprehensive plan, I think we've all learned a lot from that process. Is we have it adopted, but it is missing some tools that we need to help utilize to make decisions. So that's the update on goal 1. Goal 2, establish a new utility billing software and meter system. It's obviously ongoing. We've had some hiccups with the meter installation groups. We're onto our second meter installation group right now, but from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that this group is more well established in the realm of replacing meters. So that should be done substantially by just before Thanksgiving is the plan. They've actually brought more people in to help expedite the process because there's been more issues identified. So the previous installer. But we'll eventually get there. Meters will be swapped out, and the utility billing software will go live on February 10th. We have a good group of people working on it internally, and it'll be over a year time from when we started the project to when this actually gets rolled out for the utility billing software. And we really think that it'll be useful to not only staff but to the public to be able to really manage their own utility usage. One thing that we predicted that would happen with the utility or with the meter swap out is we're finding homes with meters that aren't in our system. So irrigation meters that were installed they were never getting billed for. So we're running into a bunch of other things that we're finding that ultimately will equate to more revenue generated, which will ultimately equate to lower overall rates to the residents. So it's a good thing. Some of the conversations that we have aren't the best, or aren't the easiest, because you're going to somebody and saying, well, for the last so long you've been not billed for this water usage and you're using this much water, your bill's going to increase. Generally people don't like that, but we're trying to be as clear and transparent as possible, and we're not going back for anything that was used in the past. It's kind of a clean slate and moving forward, and some of those things are a choice. Utility or non-essential water meters or non-essential water usage is a choice that a customer can make. So I think it's all good. Our go live date is February 10th. I did send an email out to City Council, but we will publish this and let the public know about that February 7th, the Friday before the Monday that this actually goes live. The group NISC comes in and goes through a bunch of scenarios and tries to get staff really on board and up to speed on the different questions and things like that that'll come up when we actually go live. So our offices will actually be closed on that February 7th to the public. We'll be in here kind of going through those things with the software vendor. Moving on to goal number 3, develop a comprehensive city policy book. Our city clerk, who ended up, she's working on that right now. We hope to have that done by the end of the year for evaluation by City Council. But the ultimate idea is that this is something we can put on our website anybody can go to it and look at the various policies that we adopt almost on a meeting by meeting basis. There's something that happens that we look at that we might change, and that we can adopt, and we can have one spot where we can look at it. I find it myself challenging at times to find policies. One thing I'll give an example is the assessment policy that we previously used 12 years ago. Very difficult to track down, but the idea is we'll have one location and we have policies everywhere, or all the policies available. Number 4 is something that is very important to me, and I think some members that are on RPAC, but really developing metrics to evaluate operations at the community center. One thing that we're doing internally here that we've talked about at Personnel and Budget is creating cost centers for revenue and expenses for various areas in the community center. Those areas include the ice arena, the fitness area, the outdoor pool, indoor pool, the facility as a whole, and then rec programming. And really looking at, are we making money? Are we losing money? How much money are we making? Or are we losing? What can we do to adjust revenue streams for this, and set some overall bearing goals for the community center as a whole. So some revenue goals, some levy contribution goals, but really we need to understand the metrics of the revenue and expenses related to the various cost centers. So we're doing that. That'll really be fully looked at by staff, RPAC, City Council in 2020. It'll really become a factor in 2020 when we budget for 2021. So keep that in mind, and we've laid the groundwork internally to be able to do that and actually get some good reports to RPAC and to City Council. I believe Johnny has a question.
Something else to add to that, which has come up that it falls right in line with the policies, are the usage of all of the different parks and agreements that we've had. Because there's so many things that were just done in handshakes that I know that TJ is going back now and trying to find, how did this come about? How is this one going on? How is that one going on? There's all kinds of agreements out there in the city that there's nothing written down. Yeah, it's been interesting.
Correct. Yeah.
All of that'll wind up being in this.
It is, and it actually piggybacks on some of the partnership stuff that we talked about in our goals too. With, and I think one of them is the use of St. Anne's Fields and things like that. That we have an handshake agreement with, but we should really memorialize those things so everybody understands what's going on. Moving on to number 5, establish a volunteer program. I've got some ideas. I've got some questions out to other communities that have volunteer programs. Really what I'm looking for is a way that service organizations can volunteer, individuals can volunteer, but more importantly, mechanisms for individuals within the community to say, here's a volunteer opportunity. Not only for the city, but for other community areas, things like that. So really trying to find a way that has a minimal administration costs to it, utilizing a website to do. So we're working on it. This will likely be something that's done in 2020, but really it's important because just at the community center alone, we have groups that ask, are there some volunteer opportunities? Well, there are. We just don't have it organized, and we don't have, project leads and things like that organized for some of these things. So really organizing it and making it easily accessible through a website. Number 6, develop a robust capital improvement and capital equipment plan. I believe we're still doing that. That's one of the ones that will never go away. It's something that we started doing in 2017, and we've just kept rolling with it moving forward. I think we've really done some sound budgeting to be able to do some of these larger capital projects. And as we look further and further out, when we do some of our asset management plans and water supply plans, we'll have a really good idea of what some of our future expenses are, and we'll have the option to be able to plan for those.
In regards to a completion on something, wouldn't that be something that we could actually say that we have completed? Because we have created the CIP, CEP, and we've implemented it. It's just gonna be a matter of just doing it on an annual basis. Why would we keep this on the list year after year?
It's totally up to the city council if they want to keep it on the list. You know, really the wording that we came up with at the retreat was
Just to
continue
continue.
to, you know, the continue to is something that we'll continue to do.
It almost seems to me, though, that it's a situation where it looks like we're not accomplishing a particular goal, and yet we did.
Yeah, if you guys are fine with checking it off, we could definitely check it off. I think we have a great capital improvement plan, but it'll continuously get better as the staff that are providing me the information are here longer, which is good and bad because they'll find more things, right? So, yeah, it's all how we want to look at it. If we think that, hey, we're doing this, we don't need to actually say it's on here. That's fine.
He'll have to make a whole, or build on another one just for the wastewater treatment plant when that's finally transferred over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
They'll have to go through a whole process.
Yep.
You're right.
Which we're already doing. I mean, we have a
I know
good
you
idea.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, number 7, perform inspections on all rental properties. Right now, our building official is on the final cleanup tier. So, what he's done is did 33% of the properties in the first quarter, 33 in the second, 33 in the third, and then anybody who hasn't responded or anybody that's out there yet is on the fourth quarter. So all those letters have been sent. Every property that we know of that had a previous license or we think is a rental has been sent a letter, and we hope to get it scheduled. So we're on pace to get this done by the end of the year. Either way, we've made leaps and bounds movement on this, so it's good. Develop a parks open space trail system master plan, and use that to apply for grants and other opportunities to make Sueur a more livable and walkable community. We are in the middle of that right now. I've just received some concept plans for Mayo Park and Legion Park, and I haven't had a chance to really look at them in depth to give any feedback, but ultimately what will happen is that'll go to RPAC group, and then it'll go to city council for adoption. And really what I'm most excited about for that is it's a tool that we can use as supporting documentation when we apply for grants. That's the missing piece in most grant applications, is a plan that is adopted by the city council that says we want this to happen. So a lot of it is just, you know, speculation, and we've gotten some grants for that. The grant that we got for the Kingsway Trail, you know, that we never adopted a plan for that, but we were able to document it and put it into a grant and get some money for it. So that's the thing I'm most excited about with that Parks Open Space Trail System plan.
And keep in mind that we lost out on over $500,000 worth of possible grant money for parks because we didn't have this in place.
Correct. Yeah, correct. I mean, I think this plan itself is going to be, I think it's around $45,000 or $50,000. The return on investment for this we'll be able to make that up pretty quickly when we start receiving grant dollars, we hope. Number 9, this is something that's another continuation one, really working with the Sueur Henderson School District to partner to provide excellent service to the community. One thing that Marlene and I are trying to do is just making sure that we're sharing facilities efficiently. So if they need to use the community center, they're not budgeting for some new fitness equipment or something like that. They're using ours, obviously trying to get compensation for that. Maintaining a one-stop shop. So we are currently using one software for recreation and community education. They've just recently hired a community education director. Some of the ideas might be to, you know, continue to have a one-stop shop, but, you know, have them go their own direction in software, because it's hard to find one software that works for both the school district and the city in the different capacities that they need. So there's things like that we're working on, and the most important thing is that we're communicating with each other, and we have these larger goals. for the community. So, number 10, engage with area land developers and builders to market with Sueur as an attractive community, to locate a development while also focusing on our current businesses and developers to ensure awareness of current programs and incentives to grow. This is really a community development aspect that is a continuing thing. One thing that really is moving this to the forefront is some of the stuff that the EDA is doing with their developments and things like that. One thing I haven't noticed is that this slide is kind of acting a little goofy on me. I believe there is some other goals, but
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a load of book.
for some reason they're not in there. So I'll just kind of go off the paper for this. So for goal number 11, we have complete a transportation and utility plan and amend the adopted plan to the 2040 comprehensive plan. One thing, Scott Schluter, the vice chair of the planning commission, came in and said exactly this. You know, we need to have a priority growth area and a future land use, a transportation plan, and a utility plan. This is something that'll happen in 2020. A couple things that we're working on right now that will go through the planning commission is that future land use and the priority growth area within the community. Once we have that, then we can go out for an RFP on the transportation plan and use those future growth areas, priority or future land use and priority growth areas to drive what we need for utility infrastructure. So that's moving. The two components of the priority growth area and future land use, they weren't in the plan, but those are minimally, they're the cost of the transportation plan, but those aren't major undertakings, something like a transportation and utility plan. And number 12, utilize various housing study recommendations, and market analysis reports to develop a comprehensive housing recruitment strategy. So this is a big one. We've done some housing studies. I believe 2012 there was one done. 2014 there was a update in 2015. So utilizing these documents to kind of come up with what do we want to do for housing in the community? What do we need for income-based housing versus developments that are general type of developments, things like that. So it's another community development type goal that we work on. So really, I mean, these are a lot of robust goals. It's pretty lofty goals. There's a lot of them, so we're working on them. Some of them are ongoing. We might be able to check the box and say we're done with them, but really, we're going to keep progressing on these and talk about them more at the city council retreat. Revise this, but really, I really like the format that we have right now, where everything is tied to the comprehensive plan. It's really easy to understand, and it's really easy. One piece of paper that you can hand to somebody and say, here's our goals, here's our direction that we want to go.
The reason why I wanted this particular agenda item added is that you all know that we're in the process of putting together our city administrator's evaluation for 2019. And obviously we use this information. We have all the various categories and subcategories that are used from these different goals that are established in our retreat to help us in that process. And our city clerk / communications and HR director has probably sent everybody an email in regards to what you need to do to get online, so that you can go ahead and start ginning up an evaluation and the narrative associated with it, which will be ultimately collected by the Personnel and Budget Committee, so that we can go ahead and get together and figure out just exactly what this guy's done this year. So, important stuff. So thank you so much for that update. This is a non-action item, so we can go on, and I very much appreciate you sharing this information with us. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Councilmember Krogman.
I'm thinking of the public also. I think they need to know what the city's doing. The problem is this gets kind of deep for a lot of people. It'd be a lot of information. Not that they couldn't understand it, but it's a lot. I'm just wondering if at some point we may want to put in our newsletter that goes with the utility bill something that says they can go online and get a copy of this or view it. It would have to be tailored for maybe there might be some technical things in here we'd have to kind of double check. But I really think it's important for the public to realize what the council and what the staff are doing for this city. This is very significant achievements that are being made. And I don't want to make work for people, but it's here basically in this format. And maybe I haven't studied it with the eye toward, do we have to kind of interpret it a little more? Perhaps we don't, but we want to make no assumptions is all I'm saying. So I would appreciate that, but just a thought.
I think it's a great idea.
It's kind of an odd thing when we think about it, because really what we're doing is a paper infrastructure. We have to have all of these things down and planned for the rest of the steps to fall in place where you can walk on it, touch it, see it.
Yeah, and so many of these items, there are metrics that can be pulled to determine just exactly how successful something is, and whether or not a program is working, or if you have to tweak something or change it, whatever it might be. So, great stuff. Thank you. A lot of work went into this, and I know it's not an ongoing thing. So, okay. So, anybody else have anything before we move on? We'll move on to line item 6 Foxtrot, which is the organizational late fee discussion, city administrative approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, this was an item requested just for discussion, and staff is looking for direction. But really, what the driving point of this is the HRA held their meeting at a date later than what the due dates were. Now, there was some conflicting meetings. MRPUC was held on the same day, that's why the HRA one was moved. MRPUC moved 3 other times, and then HRA just kept theirs on the same day. They've since adjusted their meeting date so that they can approve bills to pay them before the delinquent bills, or before any past dues are assessed. But really, overall, just a policy discussion on how we handle this type of situation. We handled it internally. We said, well, we'll waive the fees moving forward, with the idea that you're going to move your meeting date. But really, what does City Council feel comfortable with as far as some of these kind of organizations? And I thought of a couple, but you could expand it to some others in the community, like nonprofits such as the Food Shelf and things like that, if we wanted to. But really, the HRA and MRPUC, the Minnesota River Valley Public Utilities Commission, come to mind as far as organizations that, if they don't have quorum, they might, for whatever reason, they might not be able to pay their bills if they're not approved, that type of thing. So really just looking at, does City Council feel like there should be a policy for this type of thing? I threw out like 3 examples of what it could be, what it could look like, but really it's really open for any discussion. What we've done in the past, and I'll use the example I just gave, was working with the HRA, and if they can move their meeting, great, then that solves all the problems. If there's a situation though that arises that maybe they can't move their meeting for whatever various reasons, how would we want to handle that? One thing would be to look at who is part of this group, that we would handle it in this manner if there would be a policy adopted. And then, the other direction that we could go is just giving staff just some general guidelines that if this happens, use our best judgment to work with some of these groups. So with it, I'll entertain any questions.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Well, I was the one that requested to have this brought back to the table a month or 2 ago. And my specific focus was around the organizations that we appoint City Council representation to, which were the 2 that you just talked about. And the reasoning for that is if we have general oversight, some sort of oversight within those organizations, I don't feel that this is going to be an ongoing, like, they're just not paying their bills. It's truly for a reason that their meetings are set up the way they are, which was the case. And so I felt like we were doing a disservice to assess them a late fee when it's essentially our own council members sitting on those boards. And so that's why I want to have this conversation. I wasn't looking so far outside the box to these other organizations, but specifically the ones that we sit on those committees.
So you're kind of thinking of maybe using some sort of a hybrid, incorporating example 2 and 3?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the third option, where it's really at the discretion. I mean, where the administration has the ability to waive that if there's circumstances around it. And I would expect that, you know, say the HRA is that person, I would expect them to reach out and ask, you know, say, hey, this is what happened, we didn't have a quorum, you know, we'll make a point to have a special meeting or some resolution to that.
Yeah, and if I may, I'll try to describe the situation that happened. The HRA director did reach out to me previously and said this was the case, and I said, yeah, we'll waive those. Then we're going through this utility billing conversion, then there's all these little nuances, right? And the direction I gave was if it's not something that's adopted by city council, remove it, it'll be on the bill, then they'll call us, right? And that's what ended up happening, and we ended up working through it, but yeah, that's exactly right.
Councilmember Fabulous?
Why can't we do something that's just like a blanket 30-day grace period? 30-day grace period on unexcused situation. However, if it's for not meeting a quorum, then the fee stays in.
If I may speak to it too, I have very little sympathy for not being a quorum unless there's a plague and
Yeah.
people can't get there. Okay, I'm being serious because we need to hold these organizations to the fact that they're established, they have a responsibility, and if they're not doing it, they shouldn't be given grace for that. Now, if there's a storm or 3 people really are sick, I can sort of see that. I would not use simple language like cannot. The last option was to approve bills when they cannot in a timely manner pay those bills. It's due to unforeseen circumstances, I could see it, but not just they can't. They need to adjust their schedules and do their paying of bills just like anybody else. These are major utility users perhaps, okay? And I can understand where, the problem I have is, I'm not sympathetic to quorum problems, but we know that our folks are showing up for MRFPUC and another community is not. And that's kind of we're penalizing ourselves because of something we don't have control over. So, again, we have to give, I think, discretion to staff, but it has to be more of an unforeseen, unusual circumstance, not just we don't want to change our schedule. I'll leave it at that. Tough one.
When I piggyback, you know, to me there's a difference between the HRA and MRFPUC. MRFPUC's all city council members, city council representatives from 2 entities. I agree that quorum should not be a factor. The HRA is solely volunteer people that have stepped up to the plate to come to the table, along with council representation from our council. And in our environment, there's extenuating circumstances. I can speak to our fire commission. We had a fire commission meeting 2 weeks ago. We didn't have quorum because it's farm season. People couldn't get out of the field because of the weather. That's a prime example of what I'm talking about when I say a quorum didn't happen. And to me, that's a legitimate excuse. Your job has to come first at that situation when you're a volunteer representation.
The fire commission, they have monthly bills, don't they? And they go through a budget.
No.
They don't?
Budget we do, but
I shook my head no, looking at Marvin, but they do occasionally have a bill or two, but really, city council approves their bills.
Right.
So, there's things that we might talk about, but they don't have authority to approve a bill or pay somebody.
but that was one circumstance where I can see the same situation happening. I mean,
Couldn't
life
you-
happens,
Yeah.
you know. And that's why I solely pointed this at the committees and commissions that are appointed by us and we have representation on.
Are there any others that we can identify besides HRA, MRFPUC, and I guess to some degree Fire Commission? Are there others that?
I would say the fire commission's not on that list. The EDA has authority to pay bills, but generally they don't have any city utility bills that I'm aware of. I don't think they do. Not to say that they might not in the future. Let's say they put up a sign and there's a electric bill for it or something like that, but EDA would be one that would come to mind. I don't know of any that have budgetary assignments.
So as it stands right now, we've been able to go ahead and correct the whole timing issue associated with meetings with both Murph, and HRA. So in essence, we're at a point right now where we can go ahead and direct staff to act accordingly.
I would make a motion on this.
I'm listening. What would be your motion?
Make a motion on the 30-day grace period. And, again, on the quorum, that the fee would stand if they didn't have a quorum, unless it was going back onto what Councilman Grogan said.
The Murph example.
Unless it was circumstances beyond control.
Okay. You got that written down?
Yeah.
Okay. Would we like to get a second for that, please?
What would you change?
How do you justify, what do you, well, we're not in discussion here, so.
We haven't done it yet. We haven't got a second, so we don't go into discussion. Right now, we're at a point where we can go ahead and do a substitute motion. Withdraw the motion and do a substitute motion,
If I may, maybe a point of order.
please.
The staff originally asked for guidance. We can give them guidance and come back as a motion.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't second it, because I think that's where it has to be worked out. Then we have something in front of us, and
To prepare the
it's not an emergency.
Yeah, exactly.
I withdraw.
What I can do is, in a future meeting, it might not be the 25th, depending on what we have on the agenda, we could come forward with a proposed motion, some language that I can maybe bounce off a couple council members to see if it fits the intent, and bring it forward at a future meeting. I think I got good language and guidance that you want some sort of grace period, but if it's just because they're not showing up for quorum, then it's not waived. But if there's an unforeseen circumstance like a snowstorm and they couldn't pay their bills and they couldn't reschedule a meeting in time, that then we can use our discretion.
I get back to the whole not having a quorum at discretion, because now to me you're opening a gray area. And that's the part I don't like about that motion, or what was withdrawn, is for that specific reason. I couldn't have voted in favor of that simply because of that statement.
Of course.
And speaking back to, I don't think the HRA's had an issue with quorum. I don't know that that's ever been an issue. So in Murph, that's a whole different.
Right.
But understand, you have the time that you receive the bill, 30 days to be able to pay that out.
As long as it wasn't related to a quorum.
As long as it's not related to a quorum.
Well, the bill's still gonna have to get paid, otherwise you're gonna accrue late charges and so on and so forth.
If I may, that's really what we're talking about, is just the late fees associated with these things. Really, we can develop a policy, or I can take this direction back to staff to use discretion. There's only two organizations really that we're talking about. If there's issues, we can, I think, work them out. If you feel the need to have a policy and adopt a policy, we definitely can develop that. But really, the staff direction at this point in time would be, use our discretion. If it seems like they're being negligent, give them a late fee. If not, waive it.
Well, I think we have to have a policy, because that's part of what we're talking about with having a policy book.
Yeah, we'll have to have a policy, I agree, but I think that we're at a point right now where we're gonna have to obviously table this and, bring it back at a later time once staff's had an opportunity to go ahead and put together the language that we can all take a look at.
And I think you summed up exactly what I was trying to get at, is using judgment to make those decisions. If it truly seems like Murphy isn't paying their bills just to not pay their bills, to me that's a different case than Murphy having a situation where, oh man, we miss her. You know, but we want to pay it. We've reached out. We've had that conversation with you and said, hey, we want to pay this, but we got to wait till we can come together and have that conversation. You know, to me, there's a difference. If you're truly not wanting to pay the bill and you're avoiding having a quorum or avoiding to not pay a bill, you're not going to reach out and say, hey, this is what's going on.
I know exactly, yeah. I know exactly what's going on, yeah. I think we got enough to go with, yeah. Okay, so, everybody feel comfortable to move on?
If I may, I appreciate the comments of our colleagues, because
Without a doubt.
it's simple to say one thing and then have to analyze it, so thank you.
Yeah, without a doubt. Good conversation. We now move on to 6 Golf, which is the Boy Scouts request. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, last week I received a request from Councilmember Huntington with his Boy Scouts of America hat on, requesting the City of Sueur waive a fee related to an overnight stay at the Sueur Community Center. This fee is adopted in our governmental fee schedule. It's $350 a night, and what this does is basically gives them free reign of the community center. They can use the ice arena, they can use the pool if they have a lifeguard, and then they can stay overnight at the facility. So, in general, it's the fee's there for a reason. They're using the facility. We have it there. What the request is to waive that fee for their event that they hold on December 27th, 2019. And really that's the request. One of the questions that came from City Council was how much have we actually spent in donations since the beginning of the year. As a reminder, we have really $20,000 that we have that we can divvy up for donation requests. Right now, minus the planning number that we have for in-kind donations for Giant Celebration that we have done for years and years. We've never put a number on it or a cap on it, but really internally, we think that number's around $5,000 for in-kind stuff that we do for Giant Celebration to help get things ready. On top of that, the Chamber of Commerce also gets an invoice from the city for reserves and for police presence, things like that. So they do pay those types of things. But the in-kind I'm talking about for Giant Celebration are like public works staff bringing picnic tables, rearranging things, that type of situation. So minus that, if we would approve this, we would be $850 over budget for the item. We approved a Rotary estimated cost for the turkey trot of about $500 for that. That was approved a meeting ago. So adding that on there, we have $850 above what we actually budgeted in 2019. If we wanted to use this for that total money.
I'd like to suggest that the various entities that we've identified as organizations that have come to the city for donations in the past, and we've got some of them listed here: the Sueur Chamber of Commerce, the Sueur Little League, Small Business Development Center, Bulldog Youth Hockey, Mike Jamboree, the Sueur ISD, Turkey Trot, Boy Scouts, Giant Celebrations, and now another Boy Scout. Keep in mind we have $20,000 a year to work with as far as donations. My recommendation would be is that we reach out to each of these entities and others to let them know that they have to get their request in so it can be evaluated in January when we go through and do our donations, and that we can divvy up the money appropriately based off whatever we get. I think that we have to, I don't want to set a policy in essence where we're going to say that we can't do anything beyond that, but it'd be nice to know all these things ahead of time so we can appropriate the money and not be almost $6,000 over as it is right now for the year.
Yeah, Exactly. The one that's going to be hard to do is the giant celebration in kind donation stuff that we do as a city. But just a point of clarification, the little questionnaire that I sent out, the 350 that's in there, is this request. That's assuming that would be on there. So, yeah, and as a reminder, so when we do this, we post this on our website, on Facebook, and we solicit for applications. We send personal application requests to people that have been awarded in the past. And this year we only had, I think, a little over 15,000 in actual requests. And then the idea was that the school district, because of some repairs that were needed at the tennis courts, requested the additional funds that were in there. So we maxed that out at 20,000 after that request to the school district was fulfilled. The turkey trot and this request would be on top of that. But not to say that we can't, go above what that is. It's up to city council.
Well, again, these were numbers that represent actual cash donations. Since then, we've come up with in-kind in regards to what resources are being allocated by the city, both equipment and personnel costs. And we've got to be able to include that as well.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Fabulous.
as we're talking about the giant celebration, does that also include the additional cost for the concert going on? Or is that concert beyond that too?
So the 5,000, and this is a high level estimate that I kind of pulled together this morning, but for that, it's with the concert stuff. So the police presence that we had there, we billed for that, and we've been paid for that, and then also the reserves that were there. That's something that we've invoiced to the Chamber of Commerce and have been paid. The in-kind stuff is, running to Mankato to pick up something for the stage, things like that, which happen. I mean, and we want to support giant celebration. I feel like, and I think it'd be beneficial to just kind of, come up with a cap of what we think is reasonable for that contributions. Many cities do that for their city celebrations because they're not run by the city. They're usually run by a nonprofit that organizes everything. But the expectation, and this has always been the case, is that the city contributes and helps out when they can. So I don't think it's a bad thing to do this for giant celebration, but it wouldn't be a bad conversation to have.
Right, and we have a certain amount of money that we allocate for unallocated expenses throughout the year, and I'm guessing that something like this would have to come out of that because it doesn't fit in any other bucket. We didn't budget this in our 2019 budget, so where's that money come from? So we're taking something to go ahead and take care of this entity, or something else maybe that we were thinking about doing can't get done. So to me, I think it just makes sense to put everything on the table in January and be able to prioritize where we're at with the different requests. Councilmember Sullivan.
So getting back to the actual request, Jasper. So it's $350. That's just for the building, correct? Use of the building.
Correct. Yeah.
So a lifeguard would be on top of that.
This group itself, I don't think uses the pool. I think it's more the ice arena is what they use. So I was just saying, if somebody would want to use the pool, we would require them.
The reason I'm asking is it does say with adult supervision they will be swimming, games, and using the ice arena.
Yeah.
My concern is, are they aware that they're going to have to hire a lifeguard? I'm assuming that's got to be a city employee.
Yeah, it would be, yes. So that would be, I guess that should be part of the request too. That's a good catch. It should be, if they truly want that to be reimbursed, otherwise they would be on the hook for it. And maybe that's not I don't know if that's the intent. The intent might be just to get the $350 waived, and they would pay for the
Well, and to me, reading the letter, it doesn't sound like they have an intent on hiring a lifeguard. It sounds like with adult supervision, they'll be swimming. And that would be concerning to me. Obviously, we can't allow the pool to be open without a lifeguard there.
It's a liability issue.
Correct, and we wouldn't, and then, they would, if they would want an hour to swim, they would have to pay for that. So,
The other piece of that is security of the pool.
Right.
You got a bunch of young guys running around, you wanna make sure that thing's secure unless there's a lifeguard there.
Yeah.
It sounds picky, but you're dealing with people having fun.
yeah, so I would, and obviously Councilmember Huntington isn't here to clarify, but the way I read this right now is that they're just requesting the $350 if they want additional you know, if they need to have the lifeguard there, they want that reimbursed, they would have to. Otherwise, they would be on the hook to cover those costs of the lifeguard.
But this is the regular fee.
This is,
So what we'd be doing is, in a motion, we waive the regular fee, but require that they additionally hire their own certified lifeguard, whatever the
for
term
the
is.
city.
Yeah.
Right, through the city,
But,
through the city.
well,
Would have to be a
Yeah,
city employee.
but, okay, if they hire a lifeguard, but they pay for it, in
Right.
addition to waiving, we're gonna waive this fee, but they're gonna pay for the lifeguard.
I don't think that that's necessary to put in the motion, as that would be required to do either way. If it's the Boy Scouts or somebody else that wants to use the pool after hours for this type of thing, they would be required to.
My only concern was the word swimming appears in the request.
Yeah.
I don't want that implied.
And I agree with what Councilmember Krogman's saying, by having this letter affixed to this document, I feel like we're authorizing them to use adult supervision for swimming, without clarifying that.
I agree.
Yeah, that is a fair point.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, let's try to break a log jam.
Sure.
I would move that we authorize the in-kind donation of $350 for the Boy Scouts to use the community center on December 27th, but that they be required separately to hire a lifeguard via the city.
I would second that motion.
Is there any discussion?
Just to clarify, the lifeguard would be required only if they intend to use the pool.
Correct.
Okay, you got everything that you need to put it in the minutes. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Good job, gentlemen, on that one. Now move on to 6 Hotel, which is the Kinetic Leasing Capital Lease Items Approval, City Administrative Approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, what you have before you is a payment request form, a request to submit that to Kinetic Leasing. This was for the electric service truck service body that was built by Crysteel and installed by Crysteel. The total amount is $19,793.01. This was in the budget, it's a budgeted item, it's just getting reimbursed for this through Kinetic Leasing.
Any questions? Entertain a motion to approve the execution of the payment request of $19,793.01 to Crysteel Truck Equipment
So
through the vendor Kinetic Leasing Incorporated.
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We now move on to 6 India, which is the real property purchase agreement terms discussion, closed meeting summary. And again, we all received the handout, 6 India handout. So city administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, again, correct, the date on the agenda item was August 12th. I'm guessing that the language was used from a previous closed meeting. The actual closed meeting occurred on October 28th. Discussed terms to a purchase agreement for PID 21.999.0120. This is the closed meeting summary that we want to enter into the record, or that's recommended to be entered into the record. The City of Sueur has interest in selling PID 21.999.0140, but only if potential buyer is willing to modify language in the proposed purchase agreement. That summarizes it, I think, meets the intent of the law to give a summary of what we discussed. If there's movement based on this direction, there may be a future closed meeting or an open meeting, but if there is movement, likely another closed meeting where we can discuss the actual terms to the modified purchase agreement.
As I see it, this is an update only, so there's no action to it.
If you're fine with the closed meeting summary, I think a motion would be appropriate to adopt that and enter that into the record.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
any discussion? motion, we have a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Crum.
As you're aware, I know, because somebody mentioned they talked to you about it. I think somebody's called me. There's rumors all over town about what this might be about. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
They can look up a PID number and find out what property's involved. But I think we need to set people's minds at ease. This is something under consideration. I'm going to ask the city administrator, because I conferred with him earlier, sort of repeat what you just sort of said. There's no decision being made at this point. There's nothing's happening. This is simply something that's being looked at. Can you explain a little better what would happen in the future then?
Yeah, so in order for the city of Sueur to sell property, which is, we went through this process most recently when the city of Sueur purchased some property from Ag Partners and then in turn sold it to the to Minnesota River Valley Public Utilities Commission. We had to do so through an ordinance and then also having a public hearing. So there's multiple steps past this purchase agreement, and even before we sign the purchase agreement, we will go through that process of having a public hearing on the sale of the property.
Well, honestly, that's the reason why I didn't think we had to take any action until we actually had some movement, but I get what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, so we're now at the comments, reports, and items of appreciation. And why don't we go ahead and start with Councilmember Fabelez tonight?
I was gonna leave RPAC for you. So I'm gonna leave RPAC for vice chair. You don't remember what you talked about, all right, then I'll talk about it.
I was gonna have to sign us a question.
What you got?
All right,
What you got for
RPAC.
RPAC?
We visited what the purpose of RPAC was. That was one of the major things was what the true purpose of RPAC was. And I read through what it says in the bylaws and kind of had a discussion about how the members of RPAC have it in their ability to work with staff, with city staff, to go through the programming, even up at the community center. It's actually part of what the purpose is, and help give feedback on that. You know, if something failed, then why did it fail? Our job is to question why it failed. Our job is to ask these questions, put forth other ideas and possibilities, and kick those things around. It's not just the idea that staff would create something and implement it and it goes out the door. RPAC is supposed to be there for helping and evaluate and so on, so that it's not just one person at the city level that is deciding what's going to happen at our community center in the community. And it goes the same way even with the park and rec study that's going on. There's input that's going to be happening. There's things that happen on the RPAC level. And we have a new member, obviously. Chris Wilkie is on now, and it was important to kind of have that conversation too. So there's some things moving forward. I think we're going to have a little bit better input on the staff and with RPAC, and I think RPAC's going to have more interaction with staff than what they've been having.
Would it be fair to say that after you guys had this discussion, everybody now is singing from the same sheet of music?
I think
Staff
so.
and RPAC members?
I think so.
Okay.
You know, and just put a big shout out there to TJ, because I'll tell you that, you know, there's a whole new concept. Our city's never had this before, and we haven't quite had a guy like TJ out there, and he's very respectful to the rest of the team, and that's just it. We're starting to figure out how to play as a team.
Did you have anything else to add for
No,
talk or anything?
I've had a number of comments on our sidewalks, a number of good, positive comments on our sidewalks, which is good. And Murpuck, we don't have anything for Murpuck. That'll be coming up next week. We do have, well, you'll talk because we're all going to the Jasper and I and Marv, council member Sullivan, are all going to CGMC, which, leave it to the dyslexic to say it backwards.
Go tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I guess you're gonna be doing some talking about that then, Councilmember Sullivan.
I guess so.
What a great segue to get to you, huh?
Had fire commission 2 weeks ago, last week, 2 weeks ago. We did not have quorum, but we did receive an update on a few of the things that we had talked about previously. The major thing was the FEMA grant that the fire department had applied for new turnout gear. Did not go through, or we did not receive that grant, so if they want to move forward, we did budget for it. Correct, Jasper?
That is correct. I think the numbers that came back after they've actually went through the process of getting fitted, it's a little higher than the budgeted numbers, but if they want to purchase them, they sure can.
Yeah. So if they decide to move forward with that, it was a budgeted item. We were just looking to get the grant money for it, because it is something they need. Had transit meeting this afternoon, Minnesota River Valley Transit. Nothing major there. We discussed our rate structure. We're going to stay with our rates that we currently have set for next year. We did find out that we will not be purchasing a bus next year. We have
No bus.
no bus. We did not get the grant with DOT. We've been on a yearly cycle getting buses, so we actually have one set for delivery at the end of the year, which would be the 2019 cycle. The 2020 cycle, we did not receive one, so it will set us behind, so we're trying to work through that. But to keep buses functional for a longer period of time, it's essentially going to set the whole cycle back. And then, like Councilmember Bradley said, we're leaving tomorrow for the CGMC conference, which will be good because the Pollution Control Agency Commissioner is actually going to be the keynote there, so excited to listen to her. That's it for me.
Councilmember Croker.
Just two things. One is just a note for all of us to keep aware. Our commission's, a lot of terms of people expire at the end of this year. And we need to encourage folks as council members and whatever, we need to be recruiting people to be on these commissions. They're really important. The other thing, I'll give you a preliminary note. In the budget you saw tonight, there was a relatively large figure for some airport improvements. What we're doing is the Airport Commission is going to work with EDA to see what we can do to have EDA help us with some of these possible expenses if we go forward. And that meeting will occur within the next week and a half, hopefully. And then the Airport Commission will meet on December 5th, and we'll be bringing a recommendation back to council. So it involves state grants and federal money. It's very confusing. There's different scenarios depending on how you do things, but I just want you to be aware things are in the works for that, and we're going to be working with EDA. So that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Kirby.
I have nothing much to report tonight. I have not had any commission meetings since our last council meeting, so I have nothing to report there. I just want to mention real quick, on behalf of the council, on behalf of our community, our condolences to the Ed Rasmussen family. He was a longtime community member, a longtime community leader, longtime teacher, and a very good friend of mine, and also a past mayor, I believe. So on behalf of our council and the city, I'd like to extend our condolences to his family. And that's it. By the way, his funeral or memorial service will be 11 o'clock on Friday at First Lutheran Church.
First Lutheran. Is there visitation?
Yeah, I believe that's 3 to 7 on Thursday at the funeral.
Yes, thank you for that update. I used to get, I was always getting updates from your place of business, but for whatever reason, I'm not getting them now, so.
You're not.
I don't know. I'll have to
I'll
check it
text
out.
you.
Thank you, appreciate that. It's nice to know who we got going on in the city. We don't have anybody from staff represented other than our top dog here, City Administrator Kergel, so I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Yeah, it sounds like we'll have a good constituent of people going to this Minnesota River Basin Ag Urban Partnership Forum on the 18th of November, which will be good. It seems like the direction, and CGMC keynote speakers, the PCA commissioner, it seems like the direction that the PCA is going is more flexibility. So this Ag Urban Partnership idea, I'm excited to learn more about it and see how we can utilize some of these things to help, more effectively treat our wastewater in our community. There's a planning commission meeting on Thursday. I believe it's at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. And you may receive an update with some possible action items on the dissolution of MRPUC as early as the 25th of November. So that's really moving forward quickly, I would say. And I'll provide updates as soon as we can. But it's looking like there could be an update at a full council sometime in the near future. That's all I have.
Okay. I don't have anything. I think you guys have done a wonderful job keeping the community updated, and I very much appreciate the way you share the information regarding your boards, commissions, and committees and other things going on within the community. So thank you. With that said, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Sue, for being here as usual.
Jasper,
Yes.
do we have any reporting that goes on from all of the different committees and boards and so on? Is there a continuous update of attendees?
Just on the website that,
Attendees.
yeah, but that would be part of the minutes, like
Oh,
the
I see,
airport
yeah.
commission.
Yeah, I want,
planning
it's something
commission.
that is
Like attendees from the public or
No.
ones that are there for like
no,
presentations?
I'm talking about the members.
Oh,
The
so
actual
like a
members.
roll call, who's all there?
Yeah.
In the minutes, yeah, that are online.
Yeah. You have to go to like
Is there anyone
planning
in
commission.
particular you're looking for?
No, I'm
Okay.
just, the thing is,